summarize the weekend that we're getting ready to go into on this heat wave. I love it, by the way. What's it supposed to be, 40 today? Let's go. Break out the Speedos, man.
I drove into work with my windows down thinking it was summertime.
Heck yeah. Love it. Nothing wrong with that.
What
And
are you
then
laughing at,
all
Jimmy?
the setup, let's get everything melted so that it can all freeze next week when it's -10. But anyway.
I'm just excited about being able to get my trash cans back on the road because I made a homeowner's mistake the last snow cycle and failed to shovel where our yard fence is, so I was not able to take the cans out.
It's kind of a rookie error.
I know. It'd been 2 years since I had to break out the shovel. Just got lost in the sauce.
The theme of today.
Lost in the sauce.
Indeed, Eddie.
I don't think that's the right phrasing there, Jimmy.
I think that works.
No.
Depends on what the motivation was of
Sauce
the
is
absent mind.
typically referring to swag or swagger, or as the kids call it, drip.
See, I don't think of lost in the sauce meaning that at all in this situation. I think Jimmy might have been tipping back a little yoo-hoo, celebrating another Chiefs inevitable Super Bowl run. Anyway, I don't want to fight about that because there's enough fight in sports this weekend. For example, big storyline going into Monday, and we'll talk mostly about it, obviously, coming up on Monday, but you have the Notre Dame Fighting Irish going for a national title. This would be title number what for them, Jimmy?
This would be title number 12 of officially recognized national championships, first since '88. I was -7.
If they were to win.
Correct.
We'll see whether or not that happens, right? You have Indiana, who's going to have to show some fight tonight, taking on Ohio State in basketball because they've got two in a row on the road here. Ohio State and then Northwestern. Then they come back a week from Sunday and host Maryland. If they lose those two games in ugly fashion, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if they go into Columbus and they go into Evanston and they get blown out in both of those games, then they come back to Assembly Hall, and Mike Woodson at that point is literally fighting for his job. Because I don't see how, and we've been through this movie before, where people say, I don't see how he can go out there and coach. I don't see how he can be on the floor. I'm not saying Woodson. I'm saying we've seen this with other coaches when things are not going well. Now, again, they may right the ship, and that fight may be non-existent, but we shall see, right?
It's also fascinating, and we'll get into this next week if it does wind up falling further and further downhill. It's a tough balance to strike when you have, regardless how you feel about Mike Woodson, the coach, there's a great deal of respect for everybody involved, from Mike Woodson, the player, Mike Woodson, the alum, what he means to Indiana. Is there a level of they're going to let it get as bad as possible, and regardless of how bad it gets, they're not going to do a midseason firing? Like, do we get to that point?
I don't think they're going to do that.
I don't either, to be clear. I
don't think he's going to step down.
Yeah, there's no reason.
But it could be interesting what happens a week from Sunday if they don't have any fight in those two games, right?
Yeah.
Purdue stays on the West Coast where they got a big win over Washington. Now they've got to go, and it seems odd to say that you're going to fight a duck, right? But Oregon's pretty darn good. You're at Oregon. They stayed out on the West Coast to just go ahead, and this is what teams are going to do when they go out there to take on the two Pacific Northwest teams. But the Boilers taking on Oregon.
Get to play on the best court in America.
Good matchup for them. You like that court?
I love the eccentric nature of it, yes. I realize it's not for everybody.
It
but
is,
for
of
me,
course, an aerial
fan.
view of the forestry of the state of Oregon.
Yeah.
I think Dane Altman's a heck of a coach. I think the Washington-Oregon addition to the Big Ten are cool. A lot of people think that that's weird. Don't fight me on it. I'm just saying. I think those two schools have some cachet.
That's the bigger thing for me about the court. I like seeing the B1G now in that forest. That's our forest now, Jake. Let's go.
Big Ten country, right,
Come
baby? And then lastly, last night, we almost had a fight between the Pacers and Pistons. Malice in the Palace Part 2, except for they're not in the Palace now. It's not even Caesar. It's not even Little Caesars anymore, is it? Pizza.
It is.
Are you sure?
Yes.
What's the big advertising on the court? I thought it was like a different name.
The venue itself is still Little Caesars Arena. There could have been different court signage because they sometimes sell that as
kind of like how
things.
it's Simon Scott Assembly Hall, but it's Branch McCracken Court.
Yeah, but there's a name of an advertiser on the court that I think says the name of the arena. I could be wrong, but when I was watching the game, I can't remember what the name of it is now, but there's the entire side of the court, long side, is the name of a business, as if it's like,
I know you've been to Detroit.
McNamara and Williams Arena or whatever.
I know you've been to Detroit many a time. I went there for the first time over the summer, and let me tell you, Little Caesars branding slaps you in the face anywhere you walk.
Yeah, no question.
I feel like if they were to go full name change on it, that would mean the dismay of Eddie's Pizza, and everybody would be sad.
No,
about that,
I believe Eddie's correct. I think it is Little Caesars Arena, but I
mean, it's kind of like how Gamebridge Fieldhouse is Gamebridge Fieldhouse, but if you watch any of the Indiana Fever games this past season, you had Cheez-It and all these other companies' sponsorship on the floor.
You do have a...
but I was surprised that there was no reference to Little Caesars when I was watching it from the eye. That's all I'm saying. But yes, now I want to know what it is that is located.
It's in cursive too, so I can't tell what it is.
Yeah.
Is it the black writing in cursive?
Yeah, so I assumed
platinum
that was
equity on it.
There you go.
There we go. So I assumed it must have been like platinum equity Fieldhouse now or whatever. But either way, after the game, there was some words exchanged. Now, in the moment, you think to yourself, fight, let's go, right? And then afterwards, it was a little bit more relaxed. And the players basically say, no, like Miles Turner, look, they're a good up-and-coming team. Like they've got, and they do have talent. I mean, Detroit is, eventually you draft enough times in the lottery, you're eventually going to get some good players. They've had some health issues as well. Jaden Ivey, obviously, the latest in that regard. But there are good young pieces there. I think the Pacers know that. The Pacers said the respectful thing after the fact, and the Pistons basically said, look, we're going to see these guys again. It's what I love. Let's go for let's create a little drama, which leads to this question. I believe this answer is cyclical. I think it comes and goes. And I think you guys may have differing answers than I, but I don't think that there is a definitive answer. Who is the Pacers' rival?
So it's interesting that you bring that up because I had a conversation with a Pacers fan the other day, one of my neighbors, and his biggest complaint about the NBA right now is, outside of some people don't like all the threes, I get all that, but there's a very huge hole for rivals in today's NBA. Those type of just drama, full-fueled Pacers-Knicks of yesteryear, it just doesn't exist as much as it did league-wide 10, 15 years ago. You asked us this during the playoffs last year. I'll stand by my answer then because I don't think this Pistons scuffle qualifies it, and I don't think we're at the point yet where Knicks and Pacers have revamped that fully. I would say the Bucks. I would still stand by Milwaukee based on the bad blood of that series and just the tension whenever they play.
I think that's fair.
And Bobby Portis still exists.
In the current installment, I think you might be right. I think there are...
All time, you could have a different conversation, but right now, I would put Milwaukee as my front runner.
Okay, all time, I would agree. I think there's there's one of two. Eddie, your thoughts?
I'm in the same boat as Jay Cook over here.
You say Milwaukee?
Mm-hmm. Just because of the recency bias.
Okay, what about, and I'm going to go in order going up, what about Detroit?
I think it could be a budding one. There's renewed tension from 20 years ago, but I need more than just that little scuffle and then going about your way.
Okay, the Knicks.
Yeah, I mean, that's always, that is the one I was referring to of yesteryear rivalry. You just got a latest playoff chapter in that could get resurgence. If you're looking historically,
I would agree.
Knicks.
I would agree that with this particular group of players, it's probably Milwaukee.
Historically, I would say New York. If you asked me all-time history of the Pacers, I would say the Knicks.
Yes. Now, the other question becomes this. I don't think that there is a singular one, but if you were to ask other franchises who their biggest rival is, what franchise would have the highest percentage of fan base that would say the Pacers?
I think right now, currently, you would, here's the problem with that. Because it's a great question.
I think this is a slam dunk answer.
Okay, then do you want me to?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Do you want me to ramble for why I'm confused by the question, or do you want to give your answer
The question is this.
Yeah.
You're going to go into every NBA arena for an entire season. You go to every season ticket holder, and you pass them out a flyer that says, rank for us the three teams you hate the most. Which NBA franchise has the highest number of season ticket holders that would rank Indiana number one? And it might be that there's only 74 people, but which franchise would have the highest number of people that would rank the Indiana Pacers as their number one rival?
I would probably say Knicks fans if you're going historical.
I think that's correct.
because you see all the documentaries and there's just Knicks fans on the street. They're like, yeah, I still hate Reggie Miller. Man, like that still runs deep. If you ask currently, though, the reason I hesitated with the question, I don't know there's a fan base that would put the Pacers at number one.
Well, I don't think there is one. But
historically, yes, New York.
I think if you were doing that with Knicks fans, any of them that are of my age or older, I mean, you have, truth be told, in the moment, and over the course of time, sometimes we forget that, you know what I mean? In the moment itself, I think you would say that number one, it would be, people would say like, you know, oh, the Pacers, like my hatred for the Pacers in 1995 as a Knicks fan was as big as any other franchise. But I think they forget the fact that the Bulls tormented them for so long. But there hasn't been respark of that or continued necessarily conversation about it the way there have been of 30 for 30s in movies, and Reggie Miller is regularly on TNT and whatever else, and whenever he is, they talk about the Knicks series, whereas when Jordan comes anywhere, they don't necessarily routinely talk about his battles in the Garden. They're talking about his, you know, the push-off of Russell and, you know, all, I mean, my gosh, the guy's got, you know, the shot against the Cavs, a million different things, right?
Here is the other thing, why I know it's New York. In the approaching 2 years this year that we've done this show, and I know you can answer this for, you know, a longer tenure reason, but just this show of Query and Company, any time we have somebody on the program from New York, tied to New York, any history with New York, the second we bring up the Pacers, they lose their mind. It's happened with Matt Verderam. It's happened with other New York writers that we've had. If you are a diehard Knicks fan, Jake, to your point, that grew up in that era, anytime we bring up the Pacers on this show, because you'll do it sometimes to get the reaction, just to probe a bit, anger immediately ensues because of how much torment Reggie Miller brought about that fan base.
Do you believe, by the way, speaking of Knicks and one of their former coaches in Mike Woodson, back to that, do you believe, because there are now, and this happens a lot, do you believe any of the chatter, any of the noise of the possibility, that something you touched on earlier, that Mike Woodson could resign or walk away?
I don't. I think that there's too much pride, and I wouldn't blame him. I wouldn't either. But I think there's too much of a pride factor there to resign midseason.
Pride or arrogance?
Well, it could be both. I'd probably say pride to be a little bit kinder, but those go hand in hand in a situation like this. You should be able to see the writing on the wall if they wind up nosediving here when they go on this big road trip for the next 5 away from Assembly Hall. Like, you should be able to have the self-awareness to be like, I see what's coming. This has been great. Let me bow out with a little bit of dignity and pass the baton. But I also get the idea of not wanting to wave a white flag, being a competitor, and maybe there is a level of arrogance. Like, I can turn it around. They can't tell me what to do, and not wanting to bow out. But no, I don't. That would surprise me. That would surprise me a great deal. I know I said on Monday that they're not making the tournament, that I've seen enough, that the Iowa performance was enough for me to realize this season's gone. And, you know, Luke Goody and whoever can get on press conferences and say all they want to not join when things turn around, I don't think we're going to have to worry about that.
I think personally, you know, there's always ebb and flow, right? There's always, when you are talking about, and I know people hate hearing this, and I understand it, but historically speaking, in this market and in this state, the marquee program of fan interest or like rabid nature is Indiana basketball. I mean, the Colts obviously now have overtaken that probably, but consistently speaking, for 3.5 decades, 4 decades, it's been Indiana basketball. So whenever you have turmoil within the program itself, whenever you have inconsistency, whenever you have, at this point, they've been consistently disappointing. That's the one consistency that Indiana has, is lack of performance. When that happens, and in particular when you have a team that has been blown out for 2 consecutive games, looks completely lifeless, looks completely directionless, and they have 2 games on the road that look like big mountains to climb, then you start getting people saying, I don't see how what's going to happen when he's on the sidelines. You had people booing. You had people calling for his firing during a game itself. You had people leaving at halftime. So therefore, the fan base becomes, hey, there's no way. How's he going to show himself? And then that in the old phone drill, that starts spinning into or transitioning into he's not going to show himself. And then people are like, I just heard it. He's stepping down. For what it's worth, I have not heard that like credibly or reliably. That's not to say that can't change, but I've not heard that to this point. That's not to say that there isn't conversation of could that be a possibility. And I think oftentimes could that be a possibility gets translated by people into that's what's happening.
Yeah.
As of right now, and I may be totally in the dark here, right? But in the people that I've asked that would probably know, I have not heard that with any sort of credibility. But I do think that it is absolutely worth keeping an eye on because I think at this point all things are in play, right?
And I don't blame whatsoever the frustration of the fan base as it stands because you go from clearly seeing the writing on the wall a decade ago that the Tom Crean era had reached its peak and you needed to go in a different direction. And you swung and missed wildly by honing in and saying out of the gate, Archie Miller's our guy, is what we're doing. We don't need to redocument all of it. But you know how that went? And they overcorrected and they said, no, it's got to be a Bob Knight guy. They go and get Woodson. They give him an extra year because they gave Archie 4. And so, okay, you got to give the alum and the famous player that same amount of time. We know how this movie's going to end. My bigger issue with all of this, and I've made it very clear, I'm from a younger generation of Indiana fan. I don't sit here bang on the table entitled saying they need to win national titles every single year or it's a failure. They need to go to Final Fours every single year, and that's a failure. And if that means I'm not a good enough Indiana fan from the old guard, that's fine. I don't really care. All I want from this program is a very simple bar. It is with that resource that they have from NIL, being in the Big Ten, and the prestige of that program, it is not a hard bar in a tournament designed to welcome you in to get there every season. And the other half of that equation, so get to the tournament every year, don't make me gouge my eyes out when I watch you play basketball. And that's all the last 2 coaches have done. Do you know how bad things have to be at Assembly Hall for me to sit here and tell you I miss watching a Tom Crean-led offense? Like, I like Tom Crean, but everybody wanted to run him out of town for a reason. Like, I've met him personally on the Adidas Trail. I know he was on with Kevin and Andy.
When he came on with us.
Yeah, I really like Coach Crean.
Right.
It was the end of the road for a reason, and I still think they made the right call with that. They've just messed up everything since. But that's how bad it is. It has gotten to a point, Jake, where I miss the days of Tom Crean chugging Diet Coke on the sideline at Assembly Hall. That's where we're at.
It wasn't Diet Coke, though. Wasn't it like some sort of a
could have been a
powder
tea. I can't remember what it was. It was some.
Here's what's interesting about Indiana. The coaching searches for Indiana over the last handful of years are like Steve Alford's offensive game. There really was no slam dunk, right?
Yeah.
Except for maybe one. Maybe one. The irony since the Bob Knight ouster of the Indiana coaching situation is that probably the coach that was the most forgettable. Like if you look at presidents, U.S. presidents, right? Archie Miller's like Calvin Coolidge. People are like, yeah, I know he's president, but like, what did Calvin Coolidge do? He's a quiet guy, silent Cal. He had one of the great quotes in presidential history when he went to a dinner and a woman sitting at the table said, my husband bet me that I couldn't get you to say more than 3 words, and he said, you lose. Like, cool stories about him. But it's just kind of there, right? People are like, I forgot he was president. And Archie Miller, when people talk about Indiana basketball, literally it's like, what happened during the Archie Miller era? And people are like, I don't know. I kind of forget. Like, they maybe would have made the tournament, but COVID happened? Okay. I think he had Romeo Langford, and he just circled a spot on the baseline and was like, just stand here? Okay. But Archie Miller is the one that when he was hired was the slam dunk hire. I mean, everybody and their brother was like, this is the campus. They've got to go get Archie Miller. Look at what this guy's done. Archie Miller was, at the time, a home run, and he became like the forgettable era. And the coach that they hired that probably had the most backlash and I'm talking about when you went out and did a search and hired a coach, probably was the best one in Kelvin Sampson. Now, he was a total scum, and he came in and was arrogant to everybody and kind of from the get-go got on the wrong side of things. But from a basketball standpoint, there is no doubt the guy absolutely can coach the game of basketball and can do it by emphasizing what Indiana fans love, which is hard-nosed defense, run through a wall, right?
He's the only one of the three, and I know Crean, basically, because Crean took the Georgia job after that. He's the only one of the three that, once he had the opportunity, took a coaching job and succeeded at a high level, to the point that, like, Houston's viewed as a national power now. Like, they are a place where kids want to go play, where they're always going to be a second weekend team consistently in the top 10. Like, yeah, he's the one that has, say what you want about him. You could be mad at him for what he did. You can be mad at the arrogance when he first took the job. He has proven his coaching acumen, turning in the Cougars into what they are in this modern era of NIL, navigating to perfection, because he was navigating those waters before it was okay.
You're right. No, you're right. I mean, again, to put a tie on that, the thing that I've always said about the Kelvin Sampson era at Indiana, what do they always say? It's not always about the punishment, or excuse me, it's not always about the crime, it's the cover-up. And when he came in, and it was Bob Kravitz that asked it, when Kelvin Sampson had his introductory press conference and he was bringing with him, and like I said, when Kelvin Sampson flew from Oklahoma to Indiana, right, they had to put him on Southwest because bags fly free, and he had so much baggage that it was going to cost too much, okay? And when he arrived, he was asked about the rules infractions that were being investigated at Oklahoma, and he said, that's a rule that we didn't take seriously. He never said, that's a rule I didn't understand. He said, that's a rule we didn't take seriously, which is a subliminal admission of guilt, right? That was then compounded, of course, by the fact that he violated the same rule again. Now, you could certainly go back and say, it's legal now. You're right. But when they changed the speed limit on I-65 from 55 to 70, they did not retroactively go back and erase everybody's speeding tickets for going 64 and a 55.
Still wouldn't have mattered for you, but
you're right.
It's okay.
I will say my driving record's impressive. It looks like my driving record from 1991 to 2003, my driving record looked like a CVS receipt. I will admit freely to that.
So you think
but Sampson could flat out coach, but I understand why they obviously had to make that change going away from him.
And to this point, just to clarify, you are in the same boat as me on Woodson, where it would surprise you if he was exiting before the season ends?
Yes. And as a matter of fact, I just talked to somebody who I do trust a lot that said, I have not heard any word of him leaving at this point. Now, that's not to say it won't happen, but somebody that I trust who is very close to it told me, no, I have not heard that, Jake. And I think this person would probably just not comment.
So stiff-arming Don Fisher's enough. That's fine. As long as he does that, he's good. He doesn't need to fully step away.
Listen, not going on the coach's show afterwards, I mean, it's a bad look for sure.
It's tough.
But he's also not. There have been other coaches, I believe, Don would know better than I think not doing the post-game show, there have been times where an assistant has been sent out, though, right?
Sure, yeah.
All right, Notre Dame, Monday night. Are you getting nervous yet, Jimmy? Or can you not start thinking about that because you're locked in on the NFL playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, that is half of it, because obviously the Chiefs play this weekend, and I'm more focused on that right now.
Who?
But also there's a level of, I understand that my fellow Notre Dame fan on these airwaves, Kevin Bowen, would probably, he can call me out for this later, call it a loser's mentality, but like, I'm very happy with what's happened to this point. I'm not lost at what's at stake on Monday, but like, you got to understand, to go my entire life without them doing anything of significance in bowls, and then to win 2 significant bowl games because of the playoff structure in 7 days, like, I'm over the moon right now. And they're going to need their best game of the season, to speak with every cliche possible, to win that game because of how shorthanded they are and how talented Ohio State is. So there's not really full-scale nerves for me yet. There will be once kickoff happens, but like, I'm also operating like nobody believes in Notre Dame. Everybody's going to pick Ohio State this weekend. Everybody's probably going to lay whatever the number is, and I get that. They're a healthier team, and they have an explosive offense, but I think Will Howard's gettable. I think Al Golden can scheme up enough to give them a chance in that game, Notre Dame's defensive coordinator. So I'm looking forward to it, but I'm not fully there with nerves yet.
We found somebody who is going to have more to say about the Notre Dame National Championship game than anybody in this panel put together.
Are we cheating
Times
on our
10.
correspondent?
What's
We're
that?
cheating on Tom Noy?
We kind of are cheating on Tom
I think
Noy.
he'd give a blessing here.
Tom will join us after the national championship game, but a guy that will have plenty to say about it is our next guest. We also today have the 2-minute drill. We're going to fly around the country and get you covered on all areas of the NFL and the national championship game. Kevin Bowen today. Stephanie White going to join us, the new Fever head coach, coming up, about 2 hours from now. She actually was on ESPN radio last night doing an NBA game out west, and I think took a red eye. So we're going to see if we can't, maybe she set the alarm on her phone to join us at 2:30 on this Friday edition, Query and Company. Hell yeah. It is so warm outside, I'm taking off the sweatshirt.
Man, a January DJ
Hang on.
Jazzy Jeff, the Fresh Prince appearance.
Hang on. Now I'm going to try to do this where it doesn't lift the T-shirt up, and the folks on the YouTube
that costs
channel
extra for the
get
YouTube
a free
chat.
ab glimpse.
We got a different type of show here if you're not careful.
Hang on. I'm doing this. I'm playing it safe. Now, don't be blinded by the massive
I just panned to Jimmy, so we're safe.
Thank goodness. I was going to say we're going to go from the fans to the only fans all of a sudden if you're not careful.
Here
there,
you're
Jake.
looking at something that's the only thing more white than that snow outside.
Men at
These
work, let's
pecs.
go.
That's right, man. I got my Men at Work T-shirt on.
I'd forgotten how liberating it is to walk around in Speedos.
That's me. Joining us now, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so based on that segue, he's on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line, and he is set to call the national championship game for the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame against Ohio State coming up on Monday. Tony Simeone joins us on the program. Tony, I'll begin with this. I think there is so much talk about the Ohio State offense and just their ability to go out. And if Chip Kelly wants to turn up that rev limiter, it's difficult for anybody to contend with that. From what you have seen over the course of the year, is Notre Dame the defense that can corral that receiving core for the Buckeyes?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's kind of the biggest question on Saturday, and thanks for having me. And just an FYI, my shirt is on. I think that when you look at this game, it's going to come down to that side of the ball, and I think the question is going to be if Notre Dame can play as much man as they have played throughout the year. I think they now lead the country in most reps in man-to-man across the board. And they don't have Benjamin Morrison, who's their best corner, but they've been without him for pretty much 3 months now. And they haven't really gotten hurt too badly in the secondary. But, of course, Ohio State's going to be the best set of receivers they've seen all year by a wide margin. So I think we'll get an idea those first couple drives, if Notre Dame can hang in there, play the way they normally play, then I like their chances. But if suddenly you see them getting out of that early, having to do things completely differently, that might be a sign that they're having to account for those great playmakers. So it'll be a great chess match early, at least I anticipate, with all the coordinators. You got 4 great coordinators in this game that I think it's going to be really fun to kind of watch them make moves and then counter those moves and who will make the best halftime adjustment. Sometimes that's where these games are won and lost. So it'll be fascinating to just keep tabs on that whole operation.
This is probably very Freudian, Tony, which, believe me, that's nothing new on this radio program for me. But is Notre Dame almost at advantage with this? Since the Northern Illinois law, like Ohio State knew, and we all knew, Ohio State could lose to Michigan, and everybody knew. They're still getting in. Everybody knew that, right? And yet, with Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois, they then put themselves in position early where every single week they had to win. Because if an additional loss, regardless of when it was, there was no way they were getting in the playoff. So they have had to play a must-win game every single Saturday. Has this team absorbed that? Has that taken away some of the not the stakes, but the ability to handle everything that comes with this time of year?
Yeah, I think it's a factor. I mean, they just released their 7th episode of their documentary, Here Come the Irish, on Peacock this morning. And talking before the Indiana game, Marcus Freeman said pretty much what you just said, that it's been a playoff scenario since they lost to NIU because there was no margin for error, and they've acted as such. Now, what I think's been interesting is that 10-game win streak to end the regular season, they didn't face any substantial game pressure, in my opinion, until the final game against USC. And they were pushed late, 5 minutes left. USC's driving to, possibly tie. Maybe they can go for 2 and take the lead late. And then Christian Gray makes an amazing play, pick 6, and they win. And then pretty much here in the playoffs, they beat Indiana handily, but Georgia, Penn State, that's been real game pressure. And they've gotten better and better with every game where the game pressure's been up in these true playoff scenarios. So I was actually kind of, I don't want to say skeptical, but just curious to see how they'd handle these playoff situations, because even though they were in maybe playoff mode where you can't lose, they weren't getting tested the way they've been getting tested here in the postseason. And now, as you guys have seen in the Sugar Bowl, and of course the Orange Bowl, the coming back from down 10 early, they've been able to answer the call, come up with the big plays when they need to, in a way that has just been so incredible to watch. So yeah, I think it helped them early on maybe jump into that mode. But I think like all these teams, like Ohio State too, when the switch had to be flipped here in December to the playoffs and in January, both teams have responded the way you want to see when the postseason rolls around.
Voice of the Irish, Tony Simeone is, I guess. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line, Notre Dame and Ohio State, Monday night for the national championship. Tony, 7 catches for 105 yards and a touchdown, including that 54-yard reception, to answer in the Penn State game in the semi for Jaden Greathouse. Is what he did individually in that game something that is repeatable to open up a real wide receiver one option for just one game? You don't need it to be over the course of the whole season. Just one game. Is Jaden Greathouse now capable? Is that something they've unlocked in their passing game?
Yeah, I think he's capable. I think we've known he's capable. I think what's been maybe both frustrating, but I think refreshing and a nice dynamic is that you don't know where the passing attack is going to come from. Now, Ohio State has that same thing, too. They got 3 great receivers. You don't really know where it's going to come from in this game either. Notre Dame's not been that explosive on the outside. But when you just started the season, you thought probably Bo Collins and Jaden Greathouse were the 2 most capable receivers of having a game like the one that Jaden Greathouse had in the Orange Bowl. And we've been kind of just waiting and waiting for that breakout performance from him. And he picked the best night and the best time for that huge 54-yarder where he put 2 guys in the secondary on their backside. So I think that he's definitely an option. But what I've seen all year is pretty much once a receiver has a game like this, Jordan Faison had 7 catches for 89 in the first playoff game against IU, and he's been relatively quiet ever since. So we haven't really seen a receiver yet have big back-to-back games. And personally, I'm okay with that because I think it's just going to be somebody else, and there's no one that Ohio State can really key in on. It's a really good Ohio State defense they're going to have to contend with. They're only allowing 10 points per game to teams not named Oregon this year. So they're going to have to be creative in how they scheme against them. But obviously, if you have Greathouse playing the way he was in the Orange Bowl and being that kind of threat, even if the numbers aren't there, it's going to open up so many other things in the offensive attack that it brings a new dynamic that maybe, 2 weeks ago, Ohio State wouldn't have had to really key in on as much coming into this game.
If I was able to travel to the future and look at the box score midnight, Monday night into Tuesday morning, and I could see on there that Riley Leonard and Jeremiah Love for Notre Dame combined for north of 300 total yards of offense together, what would you think the end result of that game was?
Oh, man, I've been wrong about all this stuff for what it's worth. Like against Georgia, I thought they had to be able to throw it, and they couldn't. And then it's just I'm never right on this. But if they have 300 yards of total offense, I think that's a great chance to win the game. I didn't have on my bingo card Riley Leonard throwing for 223 in the Orange Bowl against a really good Penn State defense, and he did. So if he's getting you to 223 through the air again, then I sure hope they're at 300 yards total offense, because the 2 of them should, you hope, are at least combining for 100, if not closer to 150, 200 on the ground when they're at their best. So I think 300 is a place you'd love to end up. 400 to me feels like a realistic goal, because that means he's throwing for 2+. Love's getting close to 100, and he's chipping in maybe with 60 or 70. That's what if they get to 400, they're definitely in business. But 300, it's probably on the fringe. But again, I've thought like the way you're thinking right now, coming into a lot of these games and thinking if they run it this many times or if they throw it that many times, it's good or it's bad. And these games just have not played out that way. You can just tell when you get into these huge moments, these huge games, it's really coming down to a drive here, a drive there, a special teams play. That's not to say that what those guys end up amassing isn't important, but it just is. You can kind of throw a lot of the basic math out of the windows. It feels like you're just going to have 4 or 5 memorable plays, and they're going to be on one side of the ball or the other that's going to swing the national championship.
Tony Simeone is our guest. He is the voice of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. He's on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Tony, is it kind of weird to you that Notre Dame managed to find the only college football program more polarizing than themselves to play in the national title game? I mean, I'm being sarcastic.
It's an interesting dynamic.
It is,
yeah,
right?
It's an interesting dynamic for sure that Notre Dame is suddenly America's darling. No
That's
doubt.
exactly right. I mean, that's kind of the point, right? I mean, they are, it is very seldom that Notre Dame would be the underdog feel-good story in a matchup. And I mean that, and that's actually a tip of the cap to Notre Dame, right? Because they have been such a brand. But having said that, Marcus Freeman is interesting because he's a guy that played at Ohio State but now coaching at Notre Dame, and he's very hard to dislike from the outside. He just seems like a cool guy, but I don't know him personally. I'm not around him. I don't see how he leads his team. What kind of dude is he?
Yeah, I've had the fortunate position of being able to interview him weekly since he took the job, which has been really insightful from my standpoint to just kind of see how he's evolved as a first-time head coach at Notre Dame. He got the job at age 35. That's just crazy to think about, that you're in charge of Notre Dame football in your mid-30s. And he has, I think what's been refreshing, quite frankly, is that he has maybe evolved as a coach, but he hasn't changed who he is. He's been very consistent in who he is and how he leads and how he wants this program to look and feel. And you just get the sense, and certainly, again, like when you're winning, I'm sure these things come easier, but you have to go out and generate the wins. This team is completely bought into him in a way that feels really infectious and quite frankly, intoxicating. As you said, on the outside, he seems like a great guy. That's the impression I always get when I'm with him. I understand why you'd want to play for him, at this school. He's very much in line with the school's mission. He's helped them kind of get up to speed a little bit, I think, with where college football is going. And at the same time, he is still living and embodying the entire Notre Dame mission, which is that it is about more than just football. And he's gone out of his way to maintain that in a time when I think it's really easy to get away from that. So it's been so fun to watch him get a lot of this attention now that I think those of us close to the program knew he was deserving of. And now that the wins are coming in the biggest games at the biggest time, I think everyone's going to be catching on that hasn't been paying attention closely. But by all, I don't think the Notre Dame fan base has rallied around a coach like this in a long time, and it's been really fun to watch. And if they win on Monday, he's going to go to a completely different level at Notre Dame that a coach hasn't been in nearly 4 decades. So it'll be unbelievable to see what happens if they do indeed win on Monday.
I know you mentioned the man tendencies, but there's been so much praise both nationally and through Notre Dame media coverage of what Al Golden has been able to do with this defense. Notre Dame defensive coordinator Al Golden, of course, especially with all the injuries you highlighted. Is it going to take another rabbit out of his hat to kind of muck things up? And in theory, if you can bring pressure and make life difficult for Will Howard, then maybe that winds up being the key?
Yeah, they have to get something great from Al Golden, and the good news for them is they've gotten something great from him every game he's been here in South Bend. I think maybe his worst game as a coordinator, or his worst decision, the only one people can think of, is a double safety blitz he brought in game 1, year 1 of Marcus Freeman and him together against Ohio State on the road that kind of let that game get not out of hand, but it was the kind of the knockout blow. Other than that one safety blitz that people sometimes still bring up, he's been perfect. What he's drawn up, they have the perfect game plan for every opponent, it seems. And again, this will be their biggest challenge yet. I don't think anybody's overlooking the caliber of opponent they have in this one. But yeah, he's done a great job. They're getting performances from guys, as you alluded to, that started the year 3rd on the depth chart. And to get the performances they're getting, it's a testament to those guys obviously stepping up and being ready to fill in for great players in front of them when they go down. But they can't step in that way without being schemed up by a great defensive mind. And that's what he's done all year. All 3 years, really, they've been excellent. But really, of course, you're seeing it against great opponents now in the postseason here. So, yeah, I believe he's going to have something creative ready. I'm sure, again, they'll play. I don't think they want to get completely away from who they are, but there's going to be some exotic looks in there. I'm sure they'll give them something to look at pre-snap that'll be nothing like what they get post-snap. You have to do that against great offenses. And I think everyone at Notre Dame is confident that if for some reason Ohio State has a bunch of success offensively in this game, it's not going to be because the defense was not schemed up right. It'll be because they have great players that made great plays.
Tony Simeone will be on the call for Notre Dame. And this is your first or second year as the voice of the Irish from a football standpoint, Tony?
First year with football.
Well, I got news for you. They win this thing. You have a lifetime contract as the voice of the Irish. I don't know if you know that or not. Even when you're 105 years old, they're still going to roll you out there because you win this. You want to talk about, hey, man, you're the luck charm, right? You're the guy.
I've been kind of banging that drum here a lot lately. That Marcus Freeman got a contract extension right before the playoffs, and I expect mine to be on my desk on Tuesday.
I think that's only fair. I think that's only fair, man. Hey, we appreciate it, and have a good call, and we will talk to you soon. I appreciate the time.
Thanks a bunch, guys. It's been a blast year one here, and just can't wait for Monday night. Should be an amazing game.
Should be good on Monday, the Irish and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Last night in Ohio State, the school or the state up north, last night in the state up north, something kind of funny happened that looked like maybe it was percolating, and then Obi Toppin Great song. This one just gets you in the mood, man. I'm telling you, spring fever. Bring on -10 on Wednesday. Let's go. It's 40 out there. Let's melt everything. Bask. I mean, look at this. I'm literally, I am fluorescent right now. I'm so pale. And, I'm not afraid of the spray tan.
No,
It's
you're
how
not. I was going to say, I thought that was usually like a monthly thing.
It's how I maintain my glow. But I just decided, you know what? Like, it's embarrassing to have that amount of sexiness over the course of the months when most people are just kind of like getting into, hoodie gear.
That's kind of you.
So, yeah. I mean, look, I look good.
That takes a certain level of humility to be willing to
Yes.
take a shelf down off of the sexy nature and, share some for other people. That's
Jimmy,
nice of you.
stop it.
I'm just saying.
Last night at the end of the Pacer game, there were some heated words. It had kind of been going on between the Pacers and Pistons, and insert automatically your flashback to the past. But at the end of the game, things got a little bit heated during the post-game handshakes, and some words were exchanged. Both sides, after the fact, kind of gave it the, hey, with the Pacers standpoint, Miles Turner saying, look, it's a good young team. I mean, we know that. And from a Pistons standpoint, it was, look, we'll see these guys again. This is the benchmark, one of them that the Pistons are trying to get up and get over, and they are a good, young, talented group. But on the Pacers radio network, Mark Boyle, Eddie Gill were talking about things at the end of the game and interviewing Obi Toppin, when you will hear Obi Toppin basically, what are you looking at me crazy for, Eddie? No.
I'm just waiting for you to throw it to this.
When you would hear Obi Toppin in this clip, let everybody know that when there might be some drama unfolding, the Pacers have a very quick extinguisher.
It looks like something is going on there on the way to the Pacer locker room.
Nah, everything good.
Everything good?
Yeah, we good. James over there, so we good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we good.
Yeah, nobody's messing with James Johnson.
We good.
No.
We good money.
Now, James Johnson, who his career trajectory in terms of transactions basically looks like the Dow Jones line, because it's like 15-day contract, full-time contract, end of year, guaranteed contract, released back, 15-day contract, guaranteed contract. With the Indiana Pacers, he just said, and James Johnson, and this is what's funny about it, I don't know James Johnson, but in talking to people around the organization, they basically say, look, he's like the nicest dude on the roster, but he also is the enforcer. He's the guy that there's a reason the Pacers keep bringing him back, because he is the guy that exactly what Obi Toppin said right there. We're kind of being flippant here, but there is a value, Jimmy, in having the guy that the rest of the roster looks at and says, as long as he's around, everything's going to be okay.
A lot of people don't know this, and this is true from what I understand. His pay stub says problem solver. So you
That's
take
right.
that for
No,
what it means, but that's what they cut it for him. So it's, yeah, I love, that's the whole reason that he is as beloved on that roster as anything, is they realize there's not going to be any problems.
Right.
James Johnson there, all good. Don't worry about it.
He is indeed the enforcer, so to speak. All right, I asked a question on Twitter that I didn't. It was one of those brain droppings, quite frankly, just a query brain dropping, and lo and behold,
Looking out
just
for it.
was off and running.
Trying to dodge it. Oh,
You're looking for the query brain dropping?
thought it was going to arrive.
I thought the brain dropping was specifically when it's like some random factoid that you had or thought.
What was the thought? I was sitting there and I just thought, you know what? And I thought I'll ask this and see if anybody and I'm still getting responses from it, which is cool. That's the fun of the X Post Twitter, right?
Now, what's your X Post Twitter handle, Jake?
That's at Jake Query, JakeQuery. And I will say in the profile picture, that tan al natural.
Sure.
Yeah, that was in the summertime. That picture was taken at the Tom Petty concert in Toronto, so it's obviously been like 5 years ago, because it was right before he passed away. But I'll let you know what the question was, and we'll get the answer from Jimmy and Eddie on their perspective of it. And we'll get back to what happened last night for the Pacers and the continued conversation about what could be happening in Bloomington next. What do we got here, Eddie?
Florida Georgia line.
Okay.
Jake.
Now this is what is the term for this style of country?
Ask Jimmy. He can tell you.
I mean, I don't know. This is just a term I made up, but this is the type of like pop, twangy, throw generic country style lyrics together and make a pop song.
Like this-
that
Oh,
bothers
you
me.
know who we can ask, Jake?
Corbin.
Corbin Lincolnfield.
I think Corbin would consider. Here's the thing. I think, and I don't know this, Florida Georgia Line, who I know is massively popular because they played at the Speedway a couple of years ago, and I mean it was Katie Bar the Door, right?
The best-selling
And-
country digital song of all time. in the
Yeah, I
US.
mean, so I get it, but I kind of get the impression.
It's called bro country.
I get the impression that Florida Georgia Line is to diehard country fans what Zima is to beer drinkers, right?
Yeah, probably.
I just texted Corbin. I'll let you know what he says.
It's like asking. I don't know this, and I'm not saying Florida Georgia Line, but I feel like that style of country, and I'm going to show my country naivete here, but I feel like that Florida Georgia Line and offering that to an old style country fan is like offering Hank Williams a Bartles and James.
Corbin
Right?
replied instantly, said, boyfriend country. He said, but seriously, pop country.
I'm
Pop
sorry.
country,
How
okay.
did he say it?
Boyfriend country.
Oh, okay. I thought he said him
He
like
actually
boyfriend
said,
country.
that would be pop country is what that is more than anything else.
It's not bad.
Thank you. We'll get into Indiana and Ohio State and Mike Woodson's what could be lessening grip on Indiana basketball. A lot remains to be seen with that as the Hoosiers have 2 away from home before they come back and take on Maryland. And as always is the case, stuff starts swirling all over the place. Pacers last night getting the win in Detroit against the Pistons. We're going to do a 2-minute drill coming up bottom of the hour. So last night I'm at dinner, and just out of nowhere I think of
Where
this.
were you at dinner, Jake?
What's that?
Where was dinner?
Drake's. Big fan
Really?
of Drake's.
Really?
Yes.
You went all the way up to Canada and you didn't bring back ketchup chips?
I was at his house. Interestingly enough, I learned that Drake a fan of the Chiefs, Yankees, and Notre Dame.
Oh,
Weird, right?
Yeah.
No, I was
Jimmy,
at,
you're Drake?
He did have a song called Jimmy Cooks.
That's
There are
right.
some parallels there.
There we go. So I'm sitting there at dinner, and then out of nowhere, I just thought to myself, you know, when I was a kid, a real treat. I mean, a real treat when I was a kid. Loved it. We used to do a thing at dinner every night. Yes, we sat as an entire family at the dinner table. I still remember everybody's seating assignment. And one of the things that we'd do, my dad was a salesman. He was a steel salesman.
Was that when movies were a nickel?
And pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah. No, there weren't movies. They were the show. We'd go to the show. But we would sit at the dinner table every night and have dinner, and the big topic of conversation to lead things off always, it was a fun game for my sisters and I, is we would try to guess where my dad had lunch because my dad was an over-the-road
Nice.
salesman. And one of the, I mean, there were like 6 potential guesses back in the day, right? One of the real, like, probably second or third round picks solidly for this game for my dad was Long John Silver's. There used to be a Long John Silver's like almost anywhere. You'd go up. When you were a kid, it was fun because the door was a big sword, the handle of the door. And, of course, they looked like, you can now tell anything that, like, you pass a place, a vet clinic, and you're like, that clearly was a Long John Silver's, right? And does anybody notice this lately? I think I pointed this out to you before. But when I say this, people listening are going to go, holy cow, I've never noticed that.
Pat and I were talking about this last night because he saw your tweet, by the way.
About Long John
Pat
Silver's?
Borderline. Yes.
Had he been to Long John Silver's?
No.
So my question was this. Have you been to Long John Silver's in the last 3 years? That
No.
was my question.
No.
Now, you can see when you pass a repurposed Long John Silver's, you can tell. Now, anybody of a certain age remembers that all the Wendy's, every Wendy's, you could tell a repurposed Wendy's because the front of the Wendy's was the rounded salad, not the salad bar, but the greenhouse type window of the front of a Wendy's. And
Same with Pizza Hut.
Pizza Hut had its own architecture, right? Mm-hmm. McDonald's had the roof slanted down for McDonald's and then had the white panes that went
Sure.
down the roof itself. Every Taco Bell looked like kind of a stucco building of a Taco Bell. Yes, Pizza Hut had its own architecture. Have you noticed now that every restaurant is the same cookie cutter square and then the right-hand side of it just has a longer column that has the name of the restaurant and the color scheme?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one of them. It's like, the only thing I can think is somebody finally figured out, you know what? These places are turning over so fast that instead of like having the embarrassment of a Taco Bell inside a repurposed old Wendy's because everybody can tell based on what it looks like, or having to just tear down the McDonald's because only one thing can go in a building that has that architecture, let's just cookie cutter them so that like when Dunkin' moves out, Tim Hortons moves in, and when Subway moves out, KFC moves in, and when Taco Bell moves out, Hardee's moves in, etc. But Long John Silver's is the one to me that is the most fascinating because, and I love it, but I think to myself, in the health-conscious era that we live in today, it's so good, but one of the things that they sell inside the carton is essentially just fried grease. People are like, oh, I love the crunchers. That's just grease that they just let, and then...
You talking about the Hush Puppies?
No, the Hush Puppies are like a dough ball that is fried.
Love a good Hush Puppy.
They take literally grease and fry it and then crisp it, and like that's the little accentuations that are inside your little tub. But I literally was fascinated by it because I'm like, wait a minute, and I don't mean this as a disrespect because I like Long John Silver's. I just never see them anymore. It's literally long gone Silver's, right? And I'm like, so when's the last time people went there? And the replies from people, like, there's this passion for Long John Silver. Then I started thinking to myself, maybe we should open a Long John Silver's. I mean, sure, it probably flies into the face of a lot of the, but I mean, I'm telling people to get the heart scan. It's good, right?
You're covering your bases.
Right. I get you both sides here, right? So when is the last time, Jimmy, that you have been to a Long John Silver's?
I would go on record and say probably nearing 15 years. I'll come clean with this. I was spoiled as a youth to the point like we would take,
Just as a youth?
a trip to Florida, probably every year. And so we would go to like getting seafood fresh from whatever. And so
do we think the seafood at Long John Silver's is fresh?
That's what I'm saying. I'm turning my nose up at the old
I mean, the fish planks?
the entire premise of
the fish fillet, actually fish at McDonald's.
the entire I have had Long John Silver's before, but it's been a very long time in that regard. I enjoyed the Hush Puppies. I remember that. Always been a big fan of Hush Puppies across the board. But in terms of getting fish, I tend to stay away when possible from the fast food options. So I would say 15 years. Eddie, what about you?
My family and I have only been once.
You've only been once to Long John Silver's?
Yes.
Okay. I'm telling you, like, there was a time where you couldn't swing a dead cat or apparently a dead fish without turning towards a Long John Silver's. They weren't necessarily at the level of, like, the ubiquitous nature of Starbucks today, but there were a lot of them.
There used to be one in Mooresville, and now it's a Euros.
Yeah, there's one. I mean, obviously, the pawn shop on Keystone was formerly.
There used to be
Long
one
John
on County
Silver's.
Line next to RIP, a Family Video. I doubt it's there anymore, but County Line near the Greenwood Park Mall, there was one. Always one right there next to Family Video.
Are they in cahoots with some other place like the Taco Bells are with KFC?
They might be underneath Yum brand because I've seen the side-by-side restaurants. That's great. Get yourself a nice quesadilla and then follow it up by the crunchers.
Which leads to another one, and it's a good place. But I think my next survey is going to be, when's the last time you went to Hardee's?
That's been a minute. Probably
Never.
Probably since my dad passed, because there was one next to the nursing home where he was at. I would say at least 8 years.
Yeah, I mean, and it's good, right? I mean, they have pretty good burgers, but like I look at Hardee's, and there's a Hardee's up in Castleton, and I'm like, I think people just use the parking lot for Ale Emporium. Like, I don't know that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like I would.
Like, they might sell some burgers just on people like, I guess I'll hit the drive-thru so I can park and go to Ale Emporium.
If we're going like, just generically true national chain fast food burger joints, I'm going to go to McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's before I would go to Hardee's at this stage.
Yeah, if you're getting a burger, for me, if you're talking fast food, then yeah, I mean, to me, Wendy's is still pretty old reliable, right? Indiana is going to be at Ohio State tonight.
With old reliable Mike Woodson.
And that's the thing. So this is where I think things are. It is hard to imagine that Mike Woodson is the coach at Indiana a year from now. This is strictly opinion. I want to be very clear on that. But it's hard to imagine it for a number of reasons. Number one, Woodson it's all been laid out 100 times over, I realize. But I do believe, and I think it's factual, that a large reason why Mike Woodson was hired is because Quinn Buckner wanted Mike Woodson to be the coach at Indiana. And that's not to say that Quinn Buckner came right out and said, it's got to be Mike Woodson because we both played for Coach Knight, and that's how it's going to be, and I'm on the board of trustees. And as a matter of fact, I believe that Quinn Buckner became the chairman of the board of trustees after Mike Woodson was hired, but he was on the board of trustees nonetheless.
You could make an argument at minimum as well, Jake, to add on to that part of the reason that you get a fourth year for Mike Woodson, along with Archie Miller getting 4 years, and you can't do it that way, was Buckner's voice.
Yes.
That's something that with his staying power, to get another year out of him.
But I don't think when Archie Miller was fired that Quinn Buckner walked in and said, okay, we're hiring Mike Woodson, end of story. There is no doubt about the fact that Indiana made overtures elsewhere, notably Brad Stevens. They had looked for other coaches. And then, yes, I do believe, though, Mike Woodson, which at the time, and I think people forget this, it wasn't like Mike Woodson was just completely out of left field. I mean, his age would have been the one thing where people might have said, like, really? I thought we'd get somebody younger. But there were a lot of people that were like, you know what? Maybe this will work and make sense because he coached in the NBA and he has that connection, etc. So he gets the job, and, in the beginning, obviously people were optimistic. They were excited. And I don't think that anybody as a person dislikes Mike Woodson. I think there's a tremendous amount of respect and reverence for what he accomplished as a player, what he accomplished just in terms of where he comes from and what he represents, and there is no reason to believe that he is a non-scrupulous individual. Now, there is absolutely critique or whisper or of the way things went down in the fact that, Thad Matta was there and then one day just wasn't, and Dane Fife was there and then one day just wasn't, and you had what appears to be a lot of nepotism in terms of the staff around Mike Woodson and the insulation of Mike Woodson. I understand all that. But where it stands right now is simply this. I think Mike Woodson, and especially this time a year ago when he said, like, I'm not going anywhere, or I'm the coach, I'm going to be here a while, or however it was that he worded it, I think he truly believed that. And I think he thought that this year was going to go as such where it was going to just take care of itself because he thought, well, I'm going to be 25-5 and we're going to get to the Sweet 16 and I got good players coming in and Mbako, and wait till people see what Omar Ballo can do, and Malik Renew's got another year under his belt, and I really like Carlisle, and I really like, Rice and some of the players that we have, and people are going to be excited about what we can do. We've not got a shooter and Goody from Illinois. It's all going to take care of itself. And so far it has not. And yes, there is still time to right the ship, don't get me wrong, but the schedule becomes brutal. They haven't even gotten into the hard part of the schedule, and that's a big part of where you wonder where things are going. Because I said on this radio show, going into the Illinois game, I said, I have a feeling tonight is a game where it's teetering, where the roof may cave in on them. I didn't expect that it would be to that level. I didn't expect that they were going to lose 25 in back-to-back games. I didn't expect that the fans would be chanting Fire Woodson. I didn't expect that people would be leaving. But I thought when I looked at the schedule that if they didn't show up to play and they looked lifeless and listless and disinterested, that things could get ugly because it would only compound from there. And the reason I said that is because of what they were coming off of against Iowa, the temperament of the fan base, which I feel like I've got a pretty good idea and feel on. I mean, I went to Indiana and still have, most of my friends that I'm in regular contact with either went to Indiana or grew up supporting Indiana and still follow it. They're at Ohio State tonight, and then, Jimmy, after that, they've got to go at Northwestern, who's really well coached. Chris Collins is a guy that I think would be an outstanding coach at Indiana. I think Ben McCollum would be an outstanding coach at Indiana. I think Bruce Pearl would be an outstanding coach at Indiana. But right now the coach at Indiana is Mike Woodson, right? They go those two. If they get blown out, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if they look disinterested and non-cohesive for both of these games, and then they come back a week from Sunday to host Maryland, that's when all of a sudden the natives get restless and it gets really ugly. And I've seen it before. I was at Assembly Hall in the game when Mike Davis coached against Vanderbilt in the NIT, and everybody's like, what are we doing here? Why are they hosting an NIT game? The later Crean years, and yes, it was a little bit surprising at the 11th hour when Crean, the way that he was dismissed. And at the time, though, as I mentioned, the one slam dunk that Indiana had at the time was the Archie Miller hire. I mean, literally everybody under the sun, coast to coast, was like, man, Indiana went and got the guy. That's the up-and-coming young, Dayton had made runs in the tournament and all of it. I mean, people were like, this is a huge hire. His brother's been great. He's a great coach. And he went through 4 years that were just like, okay. Kelvin Sampson was probably the best coach they've hired, but you know what happened there. But in the end of the Crean years, and then Kelvin Sampson, people forget, was removed, and you had an interim coach that comes in, and that becomes ugly. So each coach that they've had, there has been, towards the end, it was like everybody knew that, the credits were starting to roll a little bit, and you kind of knew the end of the movie was coming. And it certainly, Jimmy, feels that way. But I'm not going to say despite what the social media rumors and everything are, right now, because we've been on the air, but I know that there is a lot of discussion and whisper of Woodson resigning sometime in the next week. That would surprise me. I don't think you can totally rule it out. That would surprise me, though. But he's in a very tough situation because his biggest ally is probably Quinn Buckner, and Quinn Buckner is on the Board of Trustees. He's the chairman of the Board of Trustees, but his tenure in that expires at the end of 2025. Yes, there will be a new basketball season that will begin between now and then, but one would assume that at the end of this year, they do take a much probably more in-depth analysis and inventory of the program in general than they have to this point under Woodson.
This is why I was so upset on Monday when we did the show, and why I'd highlighted then that the season was done and they weren't going to make the tournament, because I'd seen enough in that Iowa game. It's not even the fact they lost, it's the way that they lost. It's become commonplace in the Mike Woodson era. Now, after the Illinois game, 21 of their 45 losses underneath Mike Woodson have been blowout losses. They get rolled more than half the time, basically, that they are coached by Mike Woodson. And it's a lack of development year over year over year from this roster. And look, I don't condone in today's world the back and forth between players and fans or players and media members on social media. I think that's silly. I don't think there's any place for it. But I don't blame the players on this roster for the mess that Indiana's in right now. I don't blame NIL for the mess that Indiana's in right now.
But NIL is going to be the reason for a lot of the backlash if they don't perform.
No, it will be, but it's ignorant backlash.
Right.
If you want to get mad at NIL, get mad at the coach that's selecting the ingredients, or get mad at the coach that's supposed to put together the tasty meal with those ingredients. You don't have these issues. Yes, UConn struggled a bit out of the gate. They won 2 straight national titles. You don't see this at UConn. You don't see it at Kansas. You don't see it at Duke. You also don't see it at new kids on the block that you've been highlighting, Jake, where NIL money is suddenly turning football schools into powerhouses for standing in the top 25, like Auburn, like
Ole Miss.
Alabama, like Ole Miss.
Well, they got Chris Beard, too. That helps.
Yeah, for certain. But navigating and having a leader that's able to do both. And the other issue, and a lot of this is hearsay, this hasn't been confirmed from Indiana. It probably never will be. But if you follow this thing, there have been some wild accusations about the level of commitment that Mike Woodson's had on the recruiting trail, and missteps through the recruitment of certain players, to the point that they've had no other choice but to pivot and go full in on NIL year after year over year. My bigger issue, though, Jake, is that we all see how this is going to end. Like, anybody can get on there on a podium with Cream and Crimson behind them and say, we're going to turn it around. It's done. You have guaranteed losses on the schedule upcoming. They haven't won at Wisconsin since Eddie was born. they're going to lose at Purdue. Like, they are going to stack losses. It's just a matter of, is it clean enough to where Mike Woodson gets a respectable break at the end of the season and it's a mutual whatever firing or parting of ways, or does it get so bad that the last dark speck on these 3 consecutive eras with Indiana ends with a famous alum getting a shameful exit by a midseason firing?
One of the things that I think hurts Indiana and Mike Woodson is the fact that I go back to a handful of years ago when I was talking to people that were, I don't know, in their early 20s, and I mentioned something about Pearl Jam. I said, "Do you guys like Pearl Jam?" And one of them said, "Oh, I love classic rock." I'm like, classic rock? Like, classic rock is like Boston and Aerosmith. And then I thought, oh, wait a minute. Classic rock Nirvana is to somebody who's 25 because it's 25, it's 30 years old, it's 35 years old, right? And Mike Woodson, and I'm in this category, so I'm not damning him for this. I think Mike Woodson thought on the recruiting trail, Jimmy, that he was 1991 Eddie Vedder, and he forgot to realize that Indiana is classic rock. That, I think, has hurt Indiana as much as anything. By the way, somebody pointed out I should put a Long John Silver's in the Quarry Gas and Gulp. That is...
Oh, that's genius.
It is, too, because here's the other thing. I've got the cleanest bathrooms, right? I've got, at the Quarry Gas and Gulp, we have dip, combos, fountain drinks, and gas.
You hired a GM
The
from one of the
cleanest
Buckies,
bathrooms.
and they took the formula.
Correct.
They're helping you out.
And so you go to the Long John Silver's, and then no worries, right? We'll
Yeah.
see you in 10, because I've got the cleanest bathrooms. It all works perfectly.
10 minutes
Now,
is very generous, Jake.
Depends on how many
Now-
crunchers you're eating.
That is also true. But the Quarry Gas and Gulp, which is going to be the first and best empire of the gas stations along the Redneck Autobahn, as J&B calls it, of the new 69 expansion. They probably have more now. Somebody probably took my idea and ran with it. But that's where we're going to put it. But we don't need the Quarry Gas and Gulp for where we're going next. You know why?
Because we're going through the air, baby.
We are. Do you have have you selected your snack for our flight?
I am going with a Quarry
Combos?
Gas and Gulp special. Indeed, I'm going with some
Nice.
combos today.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Have you put your tray in the upright position?
It's always locked, ready
All
to
right.
go.
Then let's do exactly that, because we're going to fly around. The NFL playoffs are upon us, and we might, you know what, let's drop in Dallas, too, because I want to know if Dion's going to Dallas, right? So I'll see if we can get a hold of Mac. 2-minute drill, flying around to different cities next. Along on a Friday here, it is Query & Company, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. My name is Jay Query. Of course, you've heard from Jimmy Cook and Eddie Garrison today. Kevin Bowen coming up at top of the hour, 2 o'clock. Stephanie White about an hour from now. Jimmy got to thinking about it. It's Friday. It's finally like 40, so it feels like spring break time. Shall we get on an airplane and fly around and take a little tour together?
I love this weekly now getting on the plane together. I'm all for it. Let's do it.
I'm asking that you please put your chair in the upright position and lock your tray table because we are going to fly around. We call it the 2-minute drill.
Spanning the globe. It's the 2-minute drill.
We'll start out west where the Rams are for now. They will be heading to Philadelphia. Stu Jackson, therams.com. Stu, let's begin with this. Want to be sensitive to it, obviously, but logistically speaking, with the fires going on in Los Angeles, how has that impacted from a logistics standpoint? How big a challenge has this been for the Rams? Have they come back to L.A.? Did they go straight to Philly? How did things work out?
Yeah, return to Los Angeles Monday night. They've been operating with the expectation that they'll be able to prepare for Sunday's divisional round playoff game against the Eagles here in Los Angeles before flying out on Saturday. And so, obviously, first and foremost, thinking of all the people that have been impacted by that, as our team president, Kevin Demos, said, it can be trite to kind of talk about, the logistical challenges that, are presented by that for the team. But, so far they've been able to do that, and that remains the expectation the rest of the week as far as practice and preparation goes for this playoff game.
Stu, sort of an underrated season for Matthew Stafford. Last 8 starts, 13 touchdowns to 1 pick. How does he keep that going against the tough Eagles defense?
Yeah, I think it starts with just making smart decisions against an opportunistic, Eagles defense. I saw, obviously they had, I think it was like 3 interceptions against Jordan Love last week, and so. And that came from, Darius Slade, Zach Vaughn, I think. Their linebacker had one of them, too. And so, this is a defensive front in the secondary that, if you don't make disciplined decisions in the pass game, they'll make you pay for it, whether it's with picks or, sacks, pressures, whatever it may be. So, starts with that and also just the protection up front, like usual, against a, physical Philadelphia front. Those two things take care of themselves. I think it puts Matthew in a good position to have a good game.
The Rams are better suited to slow down Jalen Hurts' legs or Jalen Hurts' arm?
I think Jalen Hurts' arm. We'll see what they learned about, or I should say from the Week 12 game. I mean, he was able to, make some plays out of structure and scramble and hit his receivers, and even Saquon Barkley for some explosive plays in the pass game. But again, I say his arm, but if they figured some things out and improved on maintaining rush lane integrity, gap integrity, and all those things, I could see that answer being different on Sunday depending on how that goes.
Stu Jackson, therams.com. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate you having me on.
In Kansas City, the Chiefs will be hosting the Houston Texans. Josh Briscoe joins us. He is with ChiefsOnSI.com. Josh, any chance that rust sets in like we saw in the college playoffs with Kansas City coming off a bye?
I really don't think so. I was very much on the side of letting these guys rest as much as possible without worrying about that. And that's partially just like the nature of football, right? Like, I just don't think that a 35-year-old Travis Kelce had any reason whatsoever to get hit against the Denver Broncos in Week 18. This is good for him. But the other thing is that this team has been here before, many times, in fact. So Andy Reid and his coaching staff and Mahomes and Kelce and the player leaders on this team all knew what it was going to look like through this bye week and trying to stay in that spot where they did a little more ones versus ones in practice. They got a little more bye week practice action than they usually would if they were still in the full flow of the season. Remember, they played 3 games in 11 days around that little Christmas trio there. I think this is only a good thing for the Chiefs. If they're rusty on the first drive, that's still a trade-off that I think is worth having. Ultimately, I think they're really going to benefit by the time off.
Josh, one of the main question marks for the Chiefs going into this game is their offensive line, especially left tackle. I know Andy Reid's been joking about a rotational deployment out there at left tackle. DJ Humphries, Joe Thuney, who do you think winds up playing the majority of the snaps at Mahomes' blind side?
I think we'll all find out as early as warm-ups on Saturday and not a moment sooner, but I am leaning towards DJ Humphries being the guy who gets to start over there. Now, look, he's only started 2 games with the Chiefs. He lost the entire season due to an ACL injury at the end of last year, and then he has the hamstring after his debut several weeks back, and then he did play in Week 18, with all those backups. He's been okay in those spots, and Tooney's gotten a lot of credit, rightfully so, for kicking out from guard to tackle to be able to kind of stabilize things, but I still think you'd rather have Caliendo as one of the best guards in the NFL, one of the best guards in NFL history, just like across his career. Put him at left guard, get Humphries at tackle, and if there is some sort of in-game disaster, I think they'd push Tooney back out again, but I think they're going to prefer having Humphries at tackle over having backup guard Mike Caliendo at left guard. I think that's the trade-off they're looking at. I think it's slightly more likely to be Humphries, but Tooney being at left tackle would not surprise me, which is pretty funny to say that this football team could have a total shake-up at left tackle, and it wouldn't even be surprising at this point because they've been winning football games in spite of the fact that they have not found a long-term answer at tackle this year.
Death, taxes, and Chiefs in the playoffs. In Kansas City, Josh Briscoe, Chiefs on SI.com. Appreciate it.
Thanks, fellas.
Up to the Motor City in Detroit, Tim Twentyman, DetroitLions.com. They will be hosting the Washington Commanders. Tim, the time is now, but Detroit felt like they were kind of backpedaling from a health standpoint, got time off. Where do things stand in terms of Dan Campbell's group and how healthy they are?
Yeah, they're feeling pretty good. They're going to get David Montgomery back, their running back. He's missed the last 3 weeks, and now that gives them, really the most dynamic backfield in the league with Jahmyr Gibbs. We've seen what he's done the last 3 weeks with David out, and now David kind of is a tone setter for this team, right? Gets those tough yards between the tackles, goal line carries, fourth downs, and then Ja's the big play. So that's a big one. And then they got Alex Anzalone back 2 weeks ago, but now he's had 2 more weeks to kind of let that broken forearm heal up, and so the Lions are in a pretty good spot. Obviously they're missing some key defenders, Liam McNeil, Aiden Hutchins, and some of those guys that they've missed all year, but they've managed to win without them, and so this is a confident football team that whoever they roll out there, they feel pretty confident that they get the job done.
Tim, between Lions head coach Dan Campbell and Commanders head coach Dan Quinn, the potential for go for it on 4th and 3, 4th and 2, 4th and 20 is off the charts. How much of this game comes down to both those coaches, how aggressive they are, and whether or not that works for them or comes back to bite them?
No, I think it's a good point by you. I think it's going to be big. You look at the regular season, Detroit went for it 33 times. That was 4th most in the NFL, but the top percentage was Washington. That was at 87%. I mean, they converted 20 of their 23 fourth down attempts. We saw last week against Tampa Bay. They went for it 5 times, completed 3 of those, and Dan Quinn wasn't shy at all. 4th and 2 at Tampa's 20-yard line on the first series of the game, went for it. So, look, I think Washington realizes that touchdowns are going to be at a premium. I think Detroit does too. This is a pretty explosive Washington offense. I think a lot of people expect points to be scored, and so, who can convert more of those, fourth downs? Who can not, who doesn't have to settle for the field goals? Who can get those touchdowns? I think that's going to be key, and it really changes how you play defense on 3rd down too, and I think that'll be interesting in this game too. 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6. That's a passing down for most teams, not for Washington and Detroit. They'll run the ball to set themselves up for a good 4th down. So really 3rd and 4th down defense is going to be really interesting to watch in this matchup.
Next year is finally here for the Detroit Lions, and everybody thinks this could be the year they break through. We shall see. Tim, in one word, give me the level of just overall maybe tense, nervous energy in Detroit.
No, I think it's confidence, guys. That's really the word. This is a team that's been there, done that. 2021, I went 3-13-1. Just missed the playoffs the year after, lost in the NFC Championship. You see the progression, right? I've laid it out for you. And so this is a confident group. They think they have the horses to do it, and they're going to be certainly very confident. Vegas believes in them on Saturday night, and everyone here in Detroit does too.
2021 to 2025, and Tim Twentyman talking about all of it from DetroitLions.com. Appreciate it, Tim.
All right, guys, anytime.
Final game of the playoff slate is Buffalo and Baltimore. We'll go WIVB to our Bills correspondent at this point, Josh Reed. Josh, after the game against Denver, from a health standpoint, Buffalo comes in how? Did they have any injuries that could linger here?
No, very healthy. I mean, you're looking at just a couple of players limited on Wednesday. That'd be backup offensive lineman, but their offensive lineman in their jumbo package, Alex Anderson. He was limited yesterday with a calf injury, and you got running back Ray Davis. He's kind of the 3rd guy on the totem pole, if you will. He's in concussion protocol. The return man, Brandon Codrington, he was a full go yesterday. He missed the first playoff game, but yeah, all in all, that's the list. I mean, it's 2 guys, and they were both limited, and so they have a chance to each play on Sunday. So they are looking really good from a health standpoint. Better than the Ravens are right now, because that Zay Flowers injury could be a big one.
Bigger point of emphasis for Buffalo, getting Josh Allen untracked both on the ground and through the air, or limiting Lamar Jackson in that capacity?
I think limiting Lamar, because I think Josh is going to do his thing. I think if you can plant a little bit of that seed early on in Lamar's head that, oh, man, no, not again. Because let's face it, I know that he did win the playoff game there in the wild card round against the Steelers team that I believe was a fraud from the beginning. He hasn't beaten a team like the Bills yet. Not in the postseason, that is.
Josh, first time in a month that Bills defense gets Matt Milano back. I've always viewed him as a heart and soul piece for them. How big is he, not just for the Ravens matchup, but for them to make a push all the way to the Super Bowl?
He's one of those guys. We've all seen it, right? At teams that are real good, they have 1 or 2 of those guys that just seem to find a way to be around the ball when it's on the ground. And you go, he always seems to jump on the loose ball. That is Matt Milano for this Bills defense. He seems to be right guy, right time, right place.
The Horseshoe Falls are just outside of Buffalo, and the Bills will hope for a little luck against the Ravens coming up to close out the weekend of playoff football. Josh Reed, WIVB in Buffalo. Appreciate it, Josh.
Thanks a lot. Stay warm.
Other side of that matchup is in Baltimore, where Nestor Aparicio, our friend at WNST, joins us to give the Ravens side of things. So, Nestor, Lamar Jackson, we just talked about it from the Buffalo standpoint. What's going to be the key for the Ravens to get Lamar uncorked, get him going and comfortable early?
Well, I think it's about getting Derrick Henry uncorked and going early and middle and late, especially late. I was an advocate for them to bring Derrick Henry in here at the trading deadline the last couple of years and wrote a lot about that for this eventuality of having to go to Buffalo on a 15-degree night, win a game, and not have to do it in the air or with Lamar's legs. But that's great. But what Lamar and Derrick Henry have done together has been unbelievable. I would say watch first down. When they have you in 2nd and 1 and 2nd and 2 and 2nd and 3, they're going to drive downhill on you all night long. And he won't need to pass the ball. I mean, a perfect scenario for them is run. You can't stop the run. The Bills are built a little light. I think that'll be the game plan.
Nestor, with or without Zay Flowers, how does this offense change?
I think there's replacement parts for him and Aguilar and Justice Hill and things that they wanted to do, quite frankly, with Deontay Johnson. They never got around to doing. I don't think they're going to throw the ball much because I don't think they're going to have to throw the ball much. I don't think this offense ever really wanted to throw the ball much, which is why I brought Derrick Henry in and built to run. They did a lot of counter stuff last week with Pittsburgh. They've used motion before. There's so many different styles they can run this offense and get someone like Justice Hill moving in the backfield to sort of offset that Zay Flowers role. But I didn't see them passing the ball a lot in this game anyway. And if Zay Flowers were healthy, he's not a 10, 12, 14 reception kind of target in this offense anyway. He was going to be more of a 6 or 8 kind of target in this kind of a game. 4th down is no one's going to punt in this game. No one's going to kick field goals in this game. And from anywhere on the field, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson believe they can get a 4th and 4, 4th and 5, 4th and 6, and they're going to be sent out there to do it. And then it's going to be about these defenses making those kinds of stops.
I said on the air a month ago, it felt like the kind of year where the Ravens could make a run, and maybe that does happen in Buffalo by staying on the ground. Nestor Aparicio, WNST in Baltimore. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Stepping away from the playoffs, Mac Engel, Fort Worth Star-Telegram, but big news with the Dallas Cowboys. Coaching vacancy. Does Jerry Jones, Mac, go to prime time and hire Deion Sanders?
Do not rule it out, but it is going to cost a lot. The buyout on Deion's contract at Colorado is anywhere between $8 and $10 million. Historically, Jerry Jones is not a big fan of overpaying for coaches, and just to hire Deion is going to require to eat $8 to $10 million unless Deion wants to finance that himself, and there's no chance of doing that. So for this to happen, a lot is going to have to happen. But it's Jerry, it's Deion. Don't rule it out.
Is it an appealing job? Do coaches go in thinking they can win under Jerry Jones?
Every one of them does. Every single one of them. And that includes Bill Parcells. And it's been more than 20 years since Bill took the job. But no, there was no bigger surprise in terms of coaching hires than when Jerry Jones convinced Bill Parcells to take the head coaching job of the Dallas Cowboys under the auspices that the GM is Jerry Jones. And Bill took it because the Dallas Cowboys are the big room. Those are his words. So when it comes to a Vegas parallel, the Cowboys are still the big room. And every coach is convinced that they can convince Jerry to do things his way. And a lot of them can.
Mac, why do you suppose someone as decorated and as synonymous with the star as Troy Aikman would go on Monday Night Countdown this past week and basically insinuate that it is not a must-have job anymore?
Because of Jerry Jones, and specifically because Troy Aikman loves Jimmy Johnson, and he equates the success that the Cowboys had to the way it was run when Jimmy Johnson was the head coach. You'll notice that really of the prominent Cowboys of that era, the only one who's really critical of the state of the Cowboys is Troy Aikman. You're not going to hear Emmitt Smith say it very much, certainly not Michael Irvin or some of the other guys. It's Troy. And Troy is of the belief that you have to have a solid coach who has all of the authority when it comes to personnel the way Jimmy did. And he thinks the reason it's not coveted is because that coach, whomever it is since then, doesn't have the complete authority that he wants in order to put together a team. Jason Garrett was close. Mike McCarthy was close. Bill was close. But there's always a reminder at the end, Jerry Jones runs the Cowboys. And it somehow always gets in the way of a coach ultimately doing it the way he wants to do it. And that's why Troy made those comments.
Mac Engel runs his column with the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Appreciate it, Mac.
Great time. Thanks, guys.
That's what we call the 2-minute drill. Best thing about that, Jimmy, I'm not going to lie to you, I like any chance that I have to limit my conversations with Mac.
I don't blame you on that. That's your history there, but I don't blame you whatsoever.
I hopefully those know the inside joke. He's one of my lifelong best friends.
Probably
By the way,
for the best with the setup there, because once the plane takes off, you don't have to worry about talking. Can't hear each other anyway, right?
That's exactly right. I put the headsets on immediately, right, to make it very clear as to what was going on. Another good friend of mine, obviously, and for all of us, Kevin Bowen, going to join us coming up top of the hour here, Friday edition, Query & Company. Thanks to all of those that participated in the 2-minute drill. I've got a little bit of motion sickness, and by the way, thanks to Mo in Ohio, man.
I like how motion sickness draws parallels to Mo.
Well, here's why I
there.
said it, because sometimes you get motion sickness if you're in the car or in the plane and you're eating too many sweet things. Mo from Ohio, Mo's the best, man. He and his son Caleb, Stephen Holder and I met up with them and had dinner with them after the last Colts game against the Jaguars. And their hometown in Ohio happens to be I just said to them as we were talking, I said, so you're from this small town in Ohio, what's the big employer? I love asking that of people in a small town. What's the big employer there? You know, what's typically, traditionally, historically been the factory or whatever in town. For these guys in Ohio, their hometown, the Dum Dum candies, the little suckers you get like at the bank?
Sure.
It's their town is home of Dum Dum suckers. So they sent me a care package after the fact full of Dum Dum suckers, and also the company they acquired Bit-O-Honey.
Ooh. Okay.
So I got a whole bag of Bit-O-Honey here.
I always go either blue raspberry or mystery box.
I didn't just
Dum Dums.
By the way, I didn't just eat a few Bit-O-Honeys. I ate like the entire comb. Here, Eddie, enjoy yourself a Bit-O-Honey.
I've got one already.
Jimmy, enjoy yourself a Bit-O-Honey. There you go.
Thank
Just
you.
a little bit. Looks like they're doing new packaging at the Bit-O-Honey folk. They're going more with a darker yellow as opposed to the bright yellow.
It's not quite modern
packaging,
but it's an upgrade from back in the day.
Now, I love when we have a sports story that we can just completely almost make fun of based on the absurdity of social media. We know social media is not real life, right?
Correct.
What? I thought everything that was on the internet was true too, Jake.
That's right. And everybody looks exactly like the photos they posted themselves on the beach.
Right.
So, do we have the breaking news sounder, Eddie? I want to make sure everybody is sitting down for this, okay? And before I do this, can you guys explain to me, what is this thing now where it says, tap the photo and open it in 4K?
Yeah, it was a trend that I think
a new one, right,
got
Jim?
popularized. Yeah,
But what
relatively new,
happens?
start of the week. Well, in some cases, if the company's not being, jerks about it, it loads a clearer photo. So there was one the other night
Well, I know.
that somebody took of the stars in the sky, and you load in 4K, and all of a sudden there's more stars there because it was a higher quality photo. There's some people, though, that are just doing it to be funny, and you load it and nothing happens.
Yeah, because my phone...
Or they post super pixelated photos and press hold in 4K, and then it doesn't do anything.
I assume there's something with engagement to that. I assume there's some because you clicked on
Because
the tweet.
my phone automatically on any photo, when you touch it, it says load in higher imaging or whatever.
Right.
Now it's 4K. And
So why did you want me to stand up, Jake?
Well, that's in part because I think that the people at the Apple Museum, aka the Jake Query
That's
Museum,
right.
have hexed your phone to the point
That's
that it's
right.
asking you to load it in 144p.
Well, they definitely have it running to slow it down. Okay, here is Eddie. I actually wanted you to make sure you're seated here because this is big time news.
Okay.
Someone posted on the TikTok, Instagram, X post, Facebook
Which one?
You're gonna have to help me with
video of
You forgot YouTube
and the YouTube.
and
Somebody
MySpace.
posted video of the crowd chanting "Fire Woodson," and now I want to make sure everybody's seated here. It appears as though McKenzie and Baco liked the post.
Oh, I saw that. And I checked it this morning, and Mbako must have unliked it because it wasn't there.
Well, according to what I was sent,
Or-
McKenzie and Baco has liked a tweet from Indiana's Barstool Instagram account.
Or it was photoshopped.
Can anyone remember the last time an active player has ever liked a post saying to fire their head coach? Not sure I've seen this at any level. He has not unliked it either.
Yeah, yes. I just went and
I'm
looked.
reading to you what somebody posted.
I did figure out a way, and this isn't tease-worthy, but I figured out a way Mike Wood's going to keep his job. It's not
All right.
tease-worthy. It's not a long sentence. It's a punchline.
Well,
You want to save it for later in the show?
yes.
All right.
And then Kevin joins us next as well. By the way, if anybody's curious whether it's a Long John Silver's within a 20-mile radius of where they live, let me know because everybody has sent me their location near them.
Fish, yeah.
Talking about it earlier. Jimmy Cook was mentioning the way in which the embattled Indiana coach Mike Woodson can save his job.
Yeah, I think it's really simple, honestly. It's surprised we haven't arrived at this conclusion yet. All he needs to do is take a page out of another controversial figure within the sports landscape of this state, give him a call, and hire Chris Ballard's agent. He does that, I think he'll be fine.
Or just Chris Ballard in general, right? Hey,
Ballard can represent him, too. I'm sure there's a cut you can have there. Yeah.
Mike Woodson literally can just, look, I got to get you guys to play better. And then just say that I'm going to do that for 9 straight years, and you're good to go, right?
That's the only, outside of them turning it around, which, again, I'd love to eat crow. Like, please make me eat crow about this and them go and make a run and make the tournament and all that. Here's the issue. The only caveat to this ending differently for Mike Woodson than we all see it ending, which is him bowing out at the end of the season or maybe a midseason firing, is he's inexplicably saved the 11th hour by somebody that still believes in him and thinks there's something being built there that's not. We just saw it happen with the Colts.
I think when Woodson was hired, Jimmy, the thought process was, this is great. This buys them an extra 4 or 5 years till they find the long-term guy. And everybody from the get-go was like, you know what? I can get on board with this because they're going to have him for a handful of years. And then whether it's Dane Fife or Thad Matta or Brad Stevens or whoever, Mike Woodson's going to get them back to prominence, national recognition, and then he's going to hand the keys over to the guy that's going to be, and Indiana has for 25 years been searching for the 25-year guy. Just have. And I go back to what I'm just going to keep saying it this way, and it sounds, people take it the wrong way, and I mean it with all good intention. At this point, their best course of action is to distance from, and I don't mean in the way like in insipid fashion, but to completely detach from the Bob Knight connection. That's not to dismiss, forget, or disregard or throw away the tremendous memories and legacy of Bob Knight, but rather to say it has now been long enough to get a good young coach that is going to bring his program to Indiana. And Tom Crean and Archie Miller were good young coaches that were not affiliated with Indiana. I get that. But when they came in, you basically told them, but we are still going to do a lot of things that are connected to the Knight era. There are a lot of things just in terms of traditions that we do here of having, 25 student managers that creates the possibility, especially in today's era of social media and things like that, to have stuff posted that makes it difficult to control a situation or a lot of the same support staff and whatever else. I'm not asking for anybody to lose their job, don't get me wrong, but that now enough time has passed where you say, we're going to go out like Louisville did, and I don't think Pat Kelsey had any, I believe that's his name, right, the coach at Louisville, who came from Charleston. I don't think he had connection to Louisville, right? You go out and you say, the name that I looked up earlier, and I've mentioned him before, the guy that's at Drake, who Ben McCollum, he's a younger guy. He's got them playing well. He came out of the division. He did the Beeline route, the Kurt Signetti route, quite frankly. He was young and successful and coached for a long time elsewhere, won a lot of games, and now he seemingly is doing the same. And that is somebody that would be able to come in.
Marcus Freeman went from 1 year as a defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. He'd been to other spots before, but it wasn't like he was this long-tenured Irish. He went to Ohio State, and they went outside the box. I'm not saying Indiana needs to do that, but to your point, Jake, it's been done.
What I'm saying is I think, and this is the challenge, with any coach like that, it has to be one, and this limits the pool. If you've got 100 coaches that are interested in coaching at Indiana, it limits the pool when you say, but it has to be one that has enough, quite frankly, Kurt Signetti-esque headspace to come in and say, it's my program now. I'm the leader now. And my footprint is going to be on all of this. And if it's rough for a while, I am a strong enough believer to steady through the questions and not fall victim to the noise. And that becomes a challenge. Speaking of Marcus Freeman, he was the defensive coordinator for Brian Kelly when he became the head coach of Notre Dame, and the guy that I believe is going to be going down to watch Marcus Freeman try to get the Irish the national championship is also keeping an eye on the defensive coordinator search for the Indianapolis Colts. Kevin Bowen, who you hear in the morning on the wake-up call with KB and Andy, joining us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line. Kevin, I'll begin Colts side of things. The search for defensive coordinator now stands where?
I believe we are 5 names in. I'm trying to say Steve Wilkes, Lou Anarumo, Dennis Allen, Wink Martindale, and Ephraim Banda, if I'm pronouncing that right. So those are the 5. Generally, I think you're seeing a little bit more of an attacking mindset from really all of them. A little bit more of a blitz rate, certainly, which I don't know if that's really saying much considering where the bar was. But again, I don't expect anything imminent, Jake. I think we're probably still a bit of a ways away from it. I just think there's still dominoes to fall. I mean, hell, you had a team open up their head coaching job earlier this week in Dallas. So that's where we're at. And again, I don't think anything will happen here imminently.
Kevin, do you think one of the candidates more than the others would require more aggressive turnover of the roster, upgrades and changes in terms of what they'd be asking for their system?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd probably say Martindale. When you think to a blitzing style, a heavy blitzing style, you're probably going to leave your corners more on islands. Well, the Colts really haven't acquired corners with that sort of thought process. They didn't play a lot of man coverage with Gus Bradley. They didn't leave him on islands a whole lot. So, that's a position group that I think we're forgetting a little bit about, Jimmy. I think everyone is so just gung-ho about Tyler Warren, and certainly he's a great talent, and I understand, hey, the only thing that matters to get right is Anthony Richardson. Yes, okay, that's probably true, but, this time last April or whatever, 9 months ago, everyone was clamoring for a corner. Everyone had mocked a corner. Well, what's happened at corner since April? Jalen Jones, I think, is taking a nice step. I don't think he's like a number 1 lockdown outside corner, but a nice step. Kenny Moore will be 30, and Juju Brents, unfortunately, has only had more injuries. So if corner was such a big need, 9 months ago in the draft, why wouldn't it be a big need now when you consider all of that, plus potentially a new defensive coordinator? So that probably is the one position I keep on coming back to of I think it's a need in Ballard's eyes. I think if you are going to be a defense that really, overhauls the system a bit and wants to be more of a pressure unit, then you got to have corners that can survive out there. So that would probably be the one guy, Martindale especially, that it could change.
Hey, Kevin, I'm sure you guys talked about this. I know John probably mentioned it yesterday as well. The announcement that the Colts would be going to Berlin, and that was partially done by them posting a graphic of 3 players standing in front of the stadium or, pictured in front of the stadium in Berlin. Those 3 players, Jonathan Taylor, Quentin Nelson, DeForest Buckner. It did not include Anthony Richardson. So everybody was like, wait a minute, how are they not including Anthony Richardson? We read into that at all?
Well, I mean, I think you read into it that they don't believe Anthony Richardson is worthy of being one of those players, and they're right, aren't they not? I mean, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I thought it was just more of a damning indication of where you're at as a franchise with your starting quarterback right now. To me, Anthony Richardson is not on the side of Lucas Oil Stadium. He's not one that you look at and say, yeah, he should be on our marketing material for the game in Berlin. I mean, no, he probably hasn't earned that. I mean, Chris Ballard said, exactly a week ago, we need to add competition to that position. So I wasn't stunned by it, but it's obviously disappointing because if you're an NFL team and you're playing a game internationally and you want to try to market that game, you probably want to have a quarterback that you would feel comfortable putting on that stuff. So, yeah, again, I wasn't surprised by it, but obviously it's not a good sign.
Kevin, I find myself, the more that we look candidate by candidate, and I've been like this since he was officially fired by Cincinnati, but I find myself drawn to Lou Anarumo just because I look at what he was able to transform from a Bengals defense that was near the bottom of the league and turn them into a catalyst for why they were able to make that run to the Super Bowl a couple seasons ago. Admittedly, I know they dropped off a bit the last 2 years, swung upward in their final push for the playoffs this past season before he's ousted. But when you look at his profile and knowing the fact that you need a coordinator that they call him the mad scientist, I believe, in Cincinnati, because he could cook up formulas that thwart the likes of Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. Don't you need a coordinator with that kind of repertoire? I know it's all on personnel too, but to be able to thwart what is the better conference for quarterbacks in the AFC?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth behind that. Obviously you've seen it firsthand with what he's been able to do occasionally against Patrick Mahomes. And, certainly it kind of goes back to maybe the debate we just had of, like, if you're living in a AFC that has these quarterbacks, how much do you need to focus on that side of the ball personnel-wise too? Just because it's, take, for example, I don't know, if you were the Broncos this year and you're going to try to get on a run, the Colts and the Broncos were the last AFC playoff team, so the Colts could have been that. Your run would have been Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and probably Patrick Mahomes. That's quite the run that you'd have to go through to get to the playoffs, all of those on the road. So defensively, yeah, you're going to need that. Defensive coordinator-wise, you would need that. Now, to be fair to the other candidates, I think some of those guys maybe don't have quite the Mahomes reputation, but they have a general reputation of being multiple and week-to-week variants and things like that. And obviously, Anarumo had a very poor finish to his career in Cincinnati. Now, I don't necessarily think their personnel was great defensively, but certainly there's some questions to answer for him there. But yeah, he's a guy that, again, comes from a defensive backfield. Actually spent a ton of time at Purdue, and he has earned kind of that reputation. Joe Burrow has always thought very highly of him. You think you'd respect that opinion. So, I can see why he's a very coveted candidate.
You mentioned couple weeks away from, or a little bit of time away rather, from them making a decision. Is that at all tied to the idea of trying to find a candidate from any of the remaining teams, be it AFC or NFC, or is that just more procedural and just the way things generally operate?
Yeah, I'd say more the latter. Yeah, I don't know, maybe one of these final 8 teams would fire their coordinator. I don't know if maybe there's you know more about it than I do. I just, maybe if there's an up-and-coming, linebackers coach or whatever, something that's like, okay, well, yeah, this guy, we like him. Maybe the job's not that attractive anymore, and that's what it comes down to, is you have to poach somebody from a second tier that's not a defensive coordinator right now. Yeah, certainly that could be the case. I'm trying to think of, like, the coordinator positions we've even seen filled so far. Tommy Rees comes to mind in Cleveland. That was just an internal promotion. So I don't even think we've maybe seen kind of the external hires. So maybe there are, more candidates that they want to, but I would say probably more procedural than anything.
Kevin, you're going to the national title game, correct?
I will be in Atlanta.
Let me rephrase that. Kevin Bowen will be watching at the Varsity during the national championship game, right? Stay out of the Cheetah Lounge.
Topical. Chili dog's delicious there.
Maybe Magic City, if they have some TVs at their establishment. Perhaps.
That's right. They got great chicken wings, I understand. Okay, so give me the rundown here. You're heading down with who?
Solo. Heading down Sunday. I'm going to do the show from my Airbnb on Monday. My brother's a bit on the fence right now, to be fair to him. He's got a 3-week-old, so totally understand that. And ticket prices include a comma. So that is quite the commitment to make. So still trying and seeing what potentially could be out there, but nonetheless, be in the area and hopefully wiggle my way into that building some way, somehow.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that literal or metaphorical? You gonna scale a fence?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I could be that guy. Who's the guy that, like, hangs in sports venues really late?
Yeah. See how long he can hang around? Yeah. Okay,
right,
so
right.
So how about
maybe
this?
I'll find that guy.
So here's my hypothetical. You go to an establishment in Atlanta somewhere to watch the game. You have resigned yourself to the fact that you're not going to get in. Notre Dame, somehow or another, this looks like the Clemson-Alabama game in the Trevor Lawrence years where they get out to this lead and you're like, oh, my gosh. And the Irish are up big, and Chip Kelly's going with the Michigan game plan of running the ball, and it's like, holy cow, Notre Dame's going to win this game. So you start heading towards the stadium to be there because it looks like it's inevitable. As you arrive at the stadium, an Ohio State fan is disgruntled, leaves, says, here, take my ticket and go in. You go in for the last 90 seconds. Do you field rush?
Well, I would love to. But part of me thinks that's highly, highly not allowed. And does anyone ever storm? Do people storm the field in neutral site?
Not since grainy video footage.
Listen, Kevin, I'm not asking legalities here.
I
mean, we're already discussing the possibility of you and your fence-sitting brother hopping a couple of them just to get in. So no, so do you go down and pull the, like, for example? A couple of years ago, I had to do, when I was doing a different radio show, I did a show live before the Indiana State Butler game, and the sales guy that sold it was an Indiana State grad, and Indiana State upset Butler at the Holman Center, and he stormed the court. Now, granted, he was like 55 at the time, looked a little odd, but so it can be done. It can be done.
Storm?
Yes.
Just him?
He was out hugging players. It was something. It was a scene. So is that what we're going to see? Marcus Freeman gets a hug from you, et cetera, et cetera.
I need to meet this guy first off because you know me. I would storm after every win. I would storm after Merrimack if got that win. So yeah, I would find a way. Certainly, that thought has not crossed my mind. Again, I'm much more of the hey, Section 228 to Chick-fil-A outside. Hey, if you need me to do fry duty, I will happily do fry duty, and try to see if I can make my way through after that. But if there's a lane and there's a hole like Jeremiah Love, I will try to find my way through it.
If you find one without a comma, are you instantly pulling the trigger?
Yeah. I mean, when you look at where the prices are right now, it's hard. I mean, in an ideal world, I'd be next to my brother watching the national championship. That's kind of how I've always envisioned it. So, the whole single ticket, I don't know. I haven't got myself to maybe go there just yet. I probably should, but I mean these prices aren't even. These are a famished and a starving fan base. They are. I get why they are at where they're at. So I don't know. Part of me says yes, but then again, I'd love to watch it next to him.
Did you go back and find the lady who served you and your daughter's smoothies to invite her to this trip to Georgia?
I did not. Yeah, for those that did not hear the story, I ran into a lovely woman earlier this week who saw my Notre Dame hat, kind of gave me the nice "Go Irish," and I was like, "Oh, that's very nice." I'm glad to hear my daughter also said "Go Irish," and then all of a sudden she goes, "Yeah, I have a "Play Like a Champion" tattoo on my back."
Awesome. That's awesome.
Did you ask to
see
it?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Did you see the tattoo?
I did not ask where. On the back
what level of amateurism are we dealing with here? You got to see the tattoo, right?
Yeah, I decided, investigation.
Let me ask you this. This woman, did it look like the tattoo might be realistic size of the actual sign?
No. I mean, this woman, I think I would, I mean, she was attractive. She did not scream, South Bend, possibly the tattoo being a little bit on the lower-ish back area. I did not get that vibe at all from her. Lovely lady. Enjoyed the conversation. She added that she fell in love with Notre Dame based off Sean Astin in Goonies. And then 8 years later, Rudy came out, and she was hooked.
So just to confirm, you did not touch the sign?
There was no touching of the sign.
Okay, all right.
There's no, but this is not a, hey,
and listen,
you can touch my tattoo and I can touch your Speedo situation.
And as a sign of my maturity, Kevin, I have abstained from any joke about One-Eyed Willie as well. So, give me that much, right? I'd like to know this. So what does your brother do for a living, if you don't mind me asking?
He's an accountant.
He's an accountant? Okay, so he's got all the numbers. He's got all the cash hanging around.
Commas don't scare him.
But here's the thing. Your brother is the one that introduced you to Notre Dame athletics, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit complicated. It's probably more our uncles, or my uncle, and probably my grandma. But yeah, I mean, I'm 5.5 years younger than Ryan, so pretty much anything he did, I loved.
Not to be, and I'm being serious here. Are your uncle and your grandmother, are they still with us?
Grandma, no. Uncle, yes.
Okay, because of and I'm being serious here. Because of just the overall nature of you and your brother have been diehard Notre Dame fans. You wear that horrendously awful Notre Dame hat that your brother gave you, and that introduced you to Notre Dame basketball. You guys are two of the 112 members nationally of the Notre Dame men's basketball fan club, and in your lifetime, this is the first time. Well, not the first time they've played for the national championship, but I mean that they have a chance to win the first title, I believe, of your lifetime, or certainly of your aware lifetime. So you guys, just for the symbolic nature of it, he's got to go, right? Even if it means that you've got to spend some of that big-time radio money, you got to go. I mean, you've been doing morning radio where you've been supporting somebody else now for like 6 years. Why not do it with your brother? Just go. Just roll with it. You got to do it.
Yeah, I mean, he does have a caveat of a 3-week-old, so that is, I think, at play
your
here.
Parents would be happy to help out.
He also he did go in 2012. I think he saw scar tissue from that. Yeah.
That was over before it began, right?
Was there a comma in that one?
Yeah. No, I don't. I think it was a little bit under, but that was another wild ticket situation, how he slid into to that ticket. So, there's part of me that looks at it as, he started in 2012. I was I think I was an intern. So, like, I was in no position to necessarily, A, money-wise, or B, work clout-wise to make the trip down there. So, maybe in a way he, started it and he's passed the torch to me, and it's my job and Lou Holtz and Jim Harbaugh's job to get it done Monday night.
All right. So finally, Kevin, in terms of back to where we started the conversation, the next step on this D coordinator search, in your estimation or opinion or anticipation, is that we will start to hear some rumblings or hone in that the Colts have perhaps had an announcement coming around when? What kind of time frame are we looking?
Yeah, I mean, I would think a hire by the end of the month. Again, from an urgency standpoint, I don't think there's think about some of these, Shane Steichen's one of them. You don't even assemble staff in some of these cases till after the Super Bowl. So I think right around there, it kind of gives you about a full month to get ready for the combine and, tell the scouts what you're looking for from a personnel standpoint and, start to evaluate in-house free agents and outside free agents and then start to make a plan there. So, yeah, I would assume something here, I guess in the next 1 to 2 weeks.
Hey, Jake, it's Josh from Noblesville. Tell Kevin I'll go with him and split the Airbnb if the wife lets me. Oh, well, listen, I mean, if you want to buy the ticket. Kevin, if somebody's willing to come along and just say, look, I'll buy the 250-yard line tickets, but I got to stay at your Airbnb. Are you down with it?
Yeah, I'm in a guest house. I mean, if someone wants to fork over, what would that be, about $4,000 plus airfare at that point? Yeah, we can sleep in the cozy Airbnb together.
Wait, you're flying down, right? Not driving?
Flying, correct. Yeah, I bought flights after the IU game. I mean, that's the cheapest. I got flights for $290 round trip.
Yeah,
Nice.
I mean, that's probably by the time you factor in gas, it's 6 1 half dozen the other. A rental car if you need to do it that way, whatever. All right, Kevin, certainly enjoy it. Best of luck to the Irish. You know how I roll. I look at it and I go, I'm not a huge Notre Dame fan, but it means Ohio State didn't win. So win-win all the way around, right? But certainly enjoy it, all right?
Yeah, I think you're one of the people that want the ground to all of a sudden, expand at about 7:30 near Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Monday night.
Yeah, there's some truth to that, but, hey. I like Marcus Freeman, man. Marcus Freeman's a cool dude, so we'll see what happens. Enjoy it.
All right, guys. Have a great weekend.
All right, Kevin Bowen on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line.
I call it you're rooting for Bane. If you remember The Dark Knight Rises, there's a scene where Bane's at the time Heinz Field, but it's, Gotham.
I don't want any fans or players injured. But if they can't play the game,
I can't confirm that when the field collapsed, those players lived. They don't show, they don't pan down, but it was an earthquake and the field fell out from under itself. So
if for some reason, they can't play the game and they just have to call it a tie, cool, right? Now,
we must take out Ohio State and Notre Dame. That's your Bane. There you go. It's actually really good if you're a Bane fan.
Okay.
I know you two might not be in that realm. But
both those two are the bane of my existence.
There you go.
Stephanie White last night for ESPN Radio was calling the game in Sacramento, between Sacramento and Houston. Took a red eye back and said, I think I'll be up at 2:30. And I said, okay, well, if you are, I'd like to have you on the show. So we're going to see if we can wake her up and talk about the new project for the Indiana Fever and just get her overall thoughts here. The new head coach of the Indiana Fever joins us next. so it's 40 out, right? So I'm walking around shorts and a T-shirt. I mean, it's damn near summer outside. And then, and this was unfortunate, slipped on a little ice, okay, fell down. They couldn't find me for an hour and a half because I'm not saying that avoiding the spray tan that I'm a little white here in the middle of January, but at this point, basically translucent. I got to get back and hit a spray tan, Jimmy, right?
I mean,
that's how I maintain my glow.
You have the connections. I figured you were always utilizing them. I don't know why you're not.
Well, you know, I bought. I shouldn't say this on the air because they're going to catch up to me. I bought a special once for for 3 months of unlimited spray tan, and they haven't caught on to it. That was like 3 years ago.
Your glow is maintained by just being around me. It's
I typically look like Eddie White, right? I go the less orange version, but that's typically what I look like. But I've been laying off a little bit, and I look like Casper now.
No, it's just your natural glow, Jake.
That's right. It's a natural glow that I have. Joining us now, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so based on that segue, she is, of course, the head basketball coach for the Indiana Fever. Last night was doing ESPN radio for Sacramento and Houston. She's on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. Stephanie White joins us. Stephanie, you have made your way back from the capital of California, correct?
I have. It has been a journey, but I made my way back.
Okay, now, I always say that red eyes are like whiskey. They're a good idea at the time, and then afterwards you're like, what in the world? And it's usually the day after you arrive where it really hits you. So are you able to sleep on red eye flights?
Not well. I'm not. I can nap a little bit, but I'm not able to sleep well on planes. I'm someone I'm 11 surgeries in, so I can't be in any one position for too long. So like sitting on a plane on a red eye is brutal.
Yeah, it's rough. Did you watch anything? Do you watch movies?
I watched film because I have another game coming up on Sunday, so I watched some film.
Look at that prep. See, that's the reason why you are not only a head coach, but also doing games on a national level and doing so very well. All right, let's begin with this. Just in terms, and I want to get into this new facility the Fever are going to get and what that's going to mean for you. But before that, I'm simply curious of this. The offseason for the WNBA is different than the NBA in the fact that a lot of times, and particularly in your playing days, players would play and go and play in other leagues in the offseason. And, basketball is year-round now. So your team stands where in terms of kind of what the team does, how often they're together in the offseason, and then maybe some of the individual ventures to maintain playing in the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit mixed. We have some players that go overseas. We have some players playing in the various leagues, Unrivaled, Athletes Unlimited, and then we have some players who have been at home or in Indy working out. So it's no longer the case where it's just kind of an automatic where players are going to go play overseas. There's a lot of different options for them. Of course, a lot of them, have side hustles, for lack of a better term, in the off season as well. Aaliyah works in television, and of course, Caitlin doing her various events and speaking events. So it's a long off season, though. I can tell you that it's too long.
When you look at Stephanie, and I think that you were, and I think everybody thought this, and I was not here when you took the job and came on the show, but when you look at Caitlin Clark and all of obviously the ubiquitous attention that she receives, part of the job I would think as a coach or as an overseer and operator of a franchise is to make sure that there is constantly cohesion and chemistry within a roster. Is there an element of resentment is the word I'll use for lack of a better one, but making sure that the rest of the roster does not become tired of the attention being focused so much in one area, rightly so, and balancing that? Is that something that you have to navigate?
I think the biggest thing for us and for me as a coach is at this point right now it's building a relationship with our players, right? Communication, building a relationship with them. I think that our players are smart enough, to understand because they've been a part of this needle moving. Every player, heck, every member of our staff. When you think about Karima and our staff members and Brianna January, who's been a part of my staff, every one of our staff members has been at different points in the journey of moving the needle for the WNBA. And Caitlin has come at this time where the intersection of the sport and popularity in the sport, social media and engagement in social media, coverage and it being in places and on networks where it can be seen, that the intersection where all of this has completely shifted it. And before that, it was Aaliyah and playing at South Carolina, certainly as well. And Katie Lou in the UConn days too, where UConn was just dominant. So I think that every one of us and every one of them understands that there's a part of this movement to get it where it is today, and now we all get to capitalize. Yes, there's a bigger lens right now on Caitlin, and deservedly so, but we all are capitalizing because of that. And so I think that it's just a unique time for all of us to be in women's sports.
Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White is our guest. She joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Coach, it's been well documented, the growth rapidly, really, the last 3 or 4 years of the WNBA and finally getting proper wages and proper media rights deals. And now you have a league in the 3-on-3 side. I know it's not tied to the league, but you can stay stateside and make money if you're a WNBA player versus having to go overseas. And I know Jake's going to get in depth more about the specifics of the practice facility, but you see 2 years ago, the Las Vegas Aces announced an entire practice facility dedicated to WNBA play. It's not shared. It's specifically for their operations. And then the Storm and the Mercury and the Sky and the Valkyrie. And now you guys follow suit. From your perspective around the W, how cool has that element been to see not only are they investing in players and coaches, but now they're going a step further and putting together high-end, state-of-the-art facilities exclusively for your club? It's awesome. It's awesome. It's deserved. It's been a long time coming. I think with the rapid growth and popularity, with the increased revenue, with the increased visibility, I feel like from the WNBA perspective, being in the bubble really catapulted this league to another level, and certainly this rookie class this season catapulted it even further. But because for the first time, people weren't out and about during the summer. Everybody was at home, so everybody tuned in, everybody engaged. There was so much, not just viewership in terms of the basketball on the floor, but there was so much going on in our country as well, and looking at these women and the men and the NBA as well, certainly, but for the first time, the WNBA and what these women are doing from a basketball perspective, from a leadership perspective, from an engagement perspective and community. I think it started this jump, and then you bring in this class and that has just taken it to another level. And I believe, for the first time brought the college fan to the WNBA and the masses, because there had been a division of sorts from college fans not carrying over completely to following their favorite players into the WNBA. And so it's just that pivotal moment where if you're not a part of taking everything to another level, practice facilities, ticket sales, engagement, all of these things, if we're not taking it to another level, we're going to get left behind. The needle is moved. You got to get on board. And I think our organization has always done what is necessary to take care of our team and our franchise and our players. And this move is another big step towards that.
Stephanie White is our guest, the head coach of the Indiana Fever. Coach, you're a mom. You have young kids, so you're hip, right? You're aware of the young kid lingo and everything else. So you know what FOMO is, right? Like on the acronym.
I do.
Fear of missing out, right? With all of this going on, this groundswell for the Fever, for women's basketball in Indiana, the new facility that's going to be going in, and for those that aren't familiar, it is essentially the old Marion County Jail location just north of Gainbridge Fieldhouse where it currently exists. With all of it happening, would you have had FOMO if you were not here to be a part of it? It feels like you, as a former player and as a legend of Indiana basketball, are where you need to be. Would it have been hard to see all of this growth without being a part of it?
Absolutely. I think that's human nature. I'm having FOMO with all the NIL stuff going on right now in college. It's can we get some back pay or something like that? Is that a thing?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, certainly. I think, for me, being a part of this league, it's a part of my DNA. Being a part of this franchise is part of the fabric of my DNA as well. And to be on the outside looking in would suck, quite frankly. But I'm fortunate to be a part of it, and I know that The more that we continue to invest in the WNBA, the bigger that it's going to continue to get. We as a league, feel a little bit like we've gotten to this point in spite of, not fully being invested in, and now we have the opportunity to take it to another level. And so I'm just excited to be a part of it. I'm excited to be a part of it with this organization that I love, with the people. Thinking about Kelly Kelly coming back. I mean, that was a huge part of my decision to come to Indiana, and Lynn, and now Amber on board. It's an amazing time to be a part of the Indiana Fever, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
The facility itself, and I think it's going to have a little of everything, right, for the Fever in terms of practice facility and I would assume like nutritional area, all of it. But it was important to the franchise for what reason other than simply kind of having your own space?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important because it shows the continued investment and commitment from the Simon family. When we're thinking about free agency and the commitment to the organization that the Simon family has made and continues to make, I mean, this is a big statement. And we want to surround our core three. When you think about our core three players, our big three, we want to surround them with great free agents. We want to continue to build our roster into a championship roster, and not just one championship. We want to win multiple championships. Continue to build our bench. I think the other thing is that the Indiana Fever and the Indiana Pacers, are just Indiana's a basketball state, right? Like we all grew up in the state. We all love the state. We all love the basketball. And for us to be, as an organization, a hallmark of the fabric of the state of Indiana, I think we take great pride in that. I know I certainly do. And I know that the Simons certainly do. And I just think it's a commitment, a long-term commitment to showing how important the Indiana Fever are to the organization.
Coach, when this thing gets built and completed, of the strength and conditioning area, the yoga and Pilates area, the retreat area, or the private courtyard area, where are we most likely to find Stephanie White on an off day around this facility?
On an off day, probably the yoga area and the quiet retreat area. Probably those two places. I've got 4 boys, so I don't get a lot of quiet time. So that would be it.
Jimmy, don't forget, by the way, the plaque designating that since it's the site of the former Marion County Jail, Jake Quarry once slept here 41 hours. Don't forget that.
Yeah, I forgot that. It's not quite a memorial yet, right?
I can't get the mugshot.
Right.
Coach, listen, if I could still get the mugshot T-shirts, I'd get you one, but it was expunged from the record. I can't find them, so it's a bit of a buzzkill.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I definitely need one of those. I'm going to have to see if there's one on, eBay or
That's
something, right?
By the way, the big 3 for you, I realize you're talking Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston. I'm not going to put Coach in the situation of commenting on it. Kelsey Mitchell was just extended for lack of a better phrase, like the franchise tag from WNBA standpoint, but it's a personnel issue in the offseason that administrators can't discuss publicly. But you still have a roster with a bunch of other players, Lexi Hull and Alyssa Smith. You've got to be excited about all of the different weapons that you're going to have to utilize over the course of the upcoming season.
No doubt. And, there's no substitute for experience, right? And this was a young roster that got a ton of experience this year. Got playoff experience, got experience going through adversity, really came together. I give this team and the coaching staff and Christy, certainly a lot of credit for the way that they stayed the course and how much they grew and improved. Knew it was going to be a matter of time. And now continuing to gain experience in the playoffs, continuing to position ourselves to compete for championships, is important, and this roster is young. This roster is fierce. It's balanced. We're going to continue to get better. We're going to continue to put pieces in place.
And your next game is which one that you've got upcoming in terms of your media responsibilities?
At Notre Dame. SMU at Notre Dame. So I'm going to head up to South Bend.
All right, well, I'll tell you what. You might want to stick around. They might be celebrating in South Bend coming up on Monday night, depending on what happens in the football game. We shall see.
How about that?
Well, Coach, I appreciate it. Certainly grab a nap, safe travels up to South Bend. We look forward to talking to you again, and welcome back home, both in terms of just your travels recently and literally speaking as well. Good talking to you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
All right, Stephanie White joining us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. Jimmy, do you have some plays of the day? I'm assuming you do with the playoffs, right?
I do indeed.
All right, it's the wildly popular and available to be sponsored Jimmy's plays of the day, and we'll do it next.
Today's plays of the day, but in name only, as we're exclusively looking towards weekend action, so plenty of time for you to plan around and shop for lines or better spreads. We'll start first in college hoops. Saturday at noon, it's Kentucky at Alabama, some SEC action. I'll take the Wildcats to win on the money line over the Crimson Tide. That game at Rupp Arena. Purdue's on the road at Oregon Saturday at 3. Give me the Boilermakers to win the money line over the Ducks. Later, still Friday, Texans, Chiefs. I'll take Chiefs wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins as an anytime touchdown scorer. I will also take Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce over 5.5 total receptions. Later on Saturday in the evening, it's the Commanders at the Detroit Lions. I'll take Lions running back David Montgomery as an anytime touchdown scorer as he returns from injury. Last bet for you, maybe the best game of the weekend on paper, Ravens at Bills in the divisional. At Buffalo at Orchard Park, I will take the Bills to win the money line over Baltimore. Eddie, any plays for you?
Ooh, I have 2.
Alrighty.
Now, I'll use my verbiage because I think your verbiage is lame. I will take the Rams plus 6.5.
You're scooping.
And I am taking the Washington Commanders plus 9.5.
Scooping twice. Scoopage all around.
Yes.
All right. I like that. So Commanders and then one more time on the other one?
I'm going Commanders plus 9.5 and the Rams plus 6.5.
All right. So those are your plays of the day.
Does Derrick Henry get within 70 yards of C.J. Stroud's passing total in Kansas City?
No. I think Stroud's going to have a good game on Saturday.
He'll go for 220, 230, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Stroud is going to throw for 228 yards.
So you're putting 150 yards on the ground for Derrick Henry then?
Well, no, that's why I said no. He won't do that. To your point,
yeah.
How much? If I went into wherever right now, Caesars in Vegas, said, yeah, I want to wager that C.J. Stroud is going to get exactly 228 yards in passing. Is there anybody that would give me that? What would my odds?
I mean, you wouldn't be able to get it like specifically like that. But
no, I want it specific. 228, yes or no?
I mean, you're asking me a foreign territory. I'm
Jimmy,
sure they'll cut
if I'm wrong. They don't do player props in like actual Vegas,
no,
do they?
They do at certain books. Because I had a Boo Booey prop that I placed during the NCAA tournament. Boo Booey.
Okay. Boo Booey.
Northwestern.
Boo-boo.
Great there.
Legend.
I think, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, a better person to ask would be over at our sister station, WIBC, Jason Hamber. I know he was in the
he's a degenerate,
casino
right?
biz and definitely a degenerate in his own right.
Degenerates next door.
I would assume that if you asked Vegas, they would take your money in some regard. But like on the apps here, the best you can do is say 220 plus or 230 plus. You can't get an exact number.
228 exact. I want odds on exact.
For over under or for exact?
There is a specific book that now offers you to just adjust the line to whatever you want it.
All right, then there is a way. Where there's a will, there's a way, Jake.
Let me tell you this. If he throws for exactly 228 yards, I'm taking the whole week off.
Good. Oh, I wasn't going to say that out loud. Sorry.
Now,
I thought my mic was off.
You know what? I think who did I hear about? There was a quarterback at some point that there was a large wager on rushing yards.
It was Mahomes last year, wasn't it, Jimmy?
Might have been.
Well, but let me finish. And then the kneel down swung it.
I feel like that happened recently too, like this season, and I can't remember what game. But that's commonplace when you're in the margins of that.
There is a quarterback, and I don't remember which one it is, like Vince Ferragamo or something like that. There is some quarterback that their career net rushing yards is like negative 140. Because it's strictly sacks and kneel downs.
It was Mahomes this year against the Falcons.
Vince Ferragamo.
John,
he was awesome.
Okay, how
was
about
he
this?
better than Dieter Brock?
He shared the quarterbacking responsibilities with what Ram? Do you remember? Later would become the athletic director at USC.
Hayden.
Pat Hayden, yep. And I think Ferragamo was the backup who took over, and then they went to the Super Bowl.
They went to the Super Bowl and got beat by the Steelers. That was the fourth and final of that run.
Yeah, that was the Lynn Swann great catch. And you know, that one, it's so easy to remember where that Super Bowl was because the sunset was so perfect.
The Rose
Bowl?
Bowl?
In Pasadena, yeah.
Yeah,
it was just
and that was kind of a home
night.
game. Was that one of the first sort of home games, I think?
Well, the first
the Rams played at Anaheim at the time, right?
Correct. Who was the first team, and Jimmy helped me because it just happened.
To win, the Buccaneers. that your question? Sorry.
To play the Super Bowl in their home stadium.
Yeah,
right?
yes. Buccaneers. Yeah.
J&B is in. What's going on in the big program on a Friday? Happy Friday.
We're going to find from JJ about the little cry act that the Pistons had after the loss last night. We'll talk a little bit about that right off the top. Remember Eldridge Ricasno that played in the NBA?
Yes.
Was at Washington. I'm going to kind of get into a little bit those. I think he was with the Pac-12 network, and now he's with the Big Ten network, and they handle it like Don McClain out on the West Coast when the Big Ten goes out there. And since Purdue's in Oregon coming up tomorrow afternoon, Eldridge Ricasno is going to join us. Plus, he's from Seattle. The passing of Gus Williams, one of my all-time favorites.
Ryan Carr's favorite player, yep.
What's that?
That was Ryan Carr's favorite player, too. Ryan Carr, our friend from the Pacers, native of Seattle, so that was his favorite player.
Right, yeah. So 1979 Supersonics, I was a big fan of that when I was little.
Who's your favorite? My favorite Eldridge all time was Eldridge Hudson.
Yeah,
UNLV, baby.
Yeah. Those are like the only three Eldridges. There's only one more. There was one that played the role of Eldridge, Courtney Thorne-Smith's son, in 2.5 Men. His name was Eldridge, too. I don't know a lot of Eldridge.
It's kind of a cool name. Eldridge. Well, we should start calling you Eldridge. You be Eldridge, and I'll be Jarvis Pastnight. We'll be the 87 Vegas team.
I loved UNLV in 87. Loved him. Everybody hated him. I did not.
Do you remember when Gerald Patio flipped up a three and it went like 9 feet off the side of the backboard, and Billy Packer said, when he misses very, very badly.
Yes, he does. Well, that's all he ever did was take a three.
Yeah, he and so that team, Freddie Banks also. Yep. Freddie Banks had 33, Gilliam had 38, I think, and then you had Bass Knight, Eldridge Hudson. Who's the other one I'm
Mark
missing?
Wade had 20 assists and then couldn't shoot a lick, remember? They just let him. I love Alford would just kind of like chill out, not play defense
4-point
whatsoever.
play, baby.
Yeah. That was so good.
That
team was all. Jarvis Bass Knight thought that IU got all the calls at the end.
Jarvis Bass Knight before the game said, all I know about Bobby Knight is I wouldn't go for anybody telling me off and pulling on my clothes. That was awesome.
I love that UNLV era.
No, they were great, man.
This is like the Miami Hurricanes era of the 80s, too. I love that, too.
90 Vegas was great, too. All right, John's up next. We will be back with you on Monday to recap everything that happens over the weekend from IU, Purdue, and as well, obviously, the playoffs and get you set for Notre Dame and Ohio State coming up on Monday. But have a wonderful weekend, everybody. John's up next. Thanks for listening to Query & Company.